A voice from a brilliant full moon asks a man named Renya if he is ready. A blonde girl in white reaches out, apologizing for getting him involved in her affairs. She explains he is being granted a second life. He calmly accepts his fate. In a flash of a memory to be, Renya smirks, declaring that he is heading out. He is surrounded by vibrant female companions, ready for the adventure that awaits him. Reality returns, and he finds himself alone in a forest beneath two brilliant suns. He shields his eyes, realizing this impossible sky confirms he's in another world. He died at 94, yet he now has a young body and no memory of his past. He walks through the woods, worrying about the dangers and his inadequate clothes. A sudden thought strikes him, and a translucent data screen materializes out of thin air. He wonders if it is an inventory, before instinctively activating the system interface. He checks his belongings, discovering his only weapon is a bamboo practice sword, a shurnai. He is puzzled to see the simple sword is classified as a powerful artifact. The help screen explains his body can now create such items, which is quite convenient. Now wearing basic armor, he still wonders why he was given a bamboo sword. A note from God explains it was a gift chosen for his past swordsmanship. He resolves that his first priority is survival and finding the nearest village. He stands at a fork in the road, wishing he'd been dropped somewhere more civilized. He considers taking the path that winds away to the right, into the dense forest. He then glances down the path to his left, which looks equally wild and unfamiliar. He decides to use a classic method, balancing a stick to let fate choose for him. A piercing scream suddenly echoes from the distance, shattering the forest's quiet peace. The stick falls, pointing right, but his attention is now completely fixed on the sound. His expression hardens instantly as he recognizes the desperate cry as a woman's scream. He stands over the fallen stick, annoyed by the poorly timed and grim interruption. His hand clenches into a tight fist as his relaxed demeanor vanishes completely. He arrives to find two armored women cornered by a group of leering mercenaries. The scarred leader mockingly tells the blonde woman, Lorna Chevalier, not to be so tense. The dark-haired warrior warns them to stay back, but another thug just chuckles menacingly. Renya's voice cuts through the tension, calling out to the group of thugs. He steps forward, asking if they feel no shame ganging up on two women. The mercenaries and the two women turn to stare at the newcomer in confusion. Renya panics internally, realizing they understood him, but tries to maintain his composure. The leader demands his business, but Renya ignores him, asking if the women are all right. The dark-haired warrior, Cheyenne, shouts at him, desperately telling him to run away. She warns that he can't win against these mercenaries from the Bemdite kingdom. The mercenary leader grins, offering to let Renya go if he simply looks away. Renya smiles coolly, replying that turning a blind eye would be inhuman of him. Cheyenne grits her teeth in frustration as the leader threatens to capture Renya as well. The leader mockingly asks what he could possibly do with the stick on his shoulder. A sudden, chilling shift occurs as Renya's casual air evaporates into cold stillness. His eyes blaze with a terrifying fury as he asks the mercenary what he just said. His aura darkens with menace as he stands tall, demanding the man say it again. The leader scoffs, asking if he's done playing tough with that simple bamboo stick. With a sharp, metallic sound, Renya smoothly draws the bamboo sword from his shoulder. The leader asks what he's planning as Renya levels the tip of the weapon at him. Renya's eyes burn with killing intent as he promises to grant the man's wish. He tells him to prepare to be beaten so badly that he'll be unable to move. The leader laughs, calling him an idiot, before charging forward to attack. With impossible speed, Renya pivots on his heel, letting the mercenaries' attack miss. The mercenary leader is confused for a split second, unable to process the movement. Renya's arm flashes out in a blur, the bamboo sword already striking its target. The leader's head snaps back from the sickening impact, his face a mask of pure shock. He is launched backwards through the air as if he were struck by a battering ram. Cheyenne gasps, her eyes wide with disbelief at the incredible display of power. Renya stands over the fallen man as the others stare in stunned silence. A downed mercenary looks on in horror, wondering what in the world just happened. Renya turns his cold gaze to the remaining thugs, preparing to offer them advice. The other mercenaries are frozen in fear and disbelief, muttering curses under their breath. A large, bald mercenary roars in rage, furious that Renya attacked his leader. He charges forward recklessly, fists clenched, as Renya calmly prepares to counter. Renya doesn't swing, he thrusts, the tip of the shurnai connecting squarely with the man's forehead. The bald man is thrown backward, a spray of blood erupting from the impact. A grim smirk on his face, Renya declares that this is not a stick, but a blade. Enraged, the remaining mercenaries surround him, screaming that they are going to kill him. Renya's expression remains cold and focused, completely unfazed by their empty threats. He observes coolly that they have all conveniently stepped right into his fighting range. His smirk widens into a predatory grin as he prepares to unleash his skills. He thrusts forward with blinding speed, impaling one of the charging men in the throat. Without a single pause, he calls out, "Next," and turns to another opponent. He brings the shurnai down in a brutal, bone-shattering strike against another mercenary's head. The remaining men can only groan in pain, shocked by his overwhelming power. The last two charge, shouting at him not to get cocky, but their attack is hopeless. Cheyenne and Lorna can only watch the one-sided massacre, their faces pale with shock. Renya stands amidst the fallen bodies, letting out a slow, controlled breath of air. One of the downed men mutters in disbelief, unable to comprehend what just happened. Another groans that he can hear what's going on but simply doesn't understand. A third, his face hidden by his hair, says he can hear but has no idea. Renya examines his shurnai, noting that despite its appearance, it has a true killing ability. He muses that it's hardly stylish for his trump card to be sealed for years. He turns his head slightly, sensing the two women cautiously approaching him from behind. Lorna steps forward, her voice soft as she thanks him for saving their lives. Renya smiles, suggesting that perhaps he shouldn't have interfered with their fight. Lorna closes her eyes in relief, admitting she cannot understand their attackers' motives. Cheyenne also thanks him, bowing her head and admitting they couldn't have won alone. She explains their attackers were masters of unarmed combat from the Bemdite kingdom. Renya asks if that is so, and Cheyenne is surprised by his apparent ignorance. She finds it strange that he doesn't know about the famous Bemdite kingdom. Renya decides to reveal his status, explaining that he is a stray person. Lorna recognizes the term, stating she has heard of them but never met one. She formally introduces herself as Lorna Chevalier, a priestess in training. The dark-haired warrior then states her name is Cheyenne Femme Fatal, a sword apprentice. He introduces himself as Korea Renya, telling them that just Renya is fine. Cheyenne suggests they leave, as the mercenaries are still alive and might wake up soon. As they walk, Renya asks if it was truly wise for them to abandon him. Cheyenne explains the geography of their world, Ildra, and their current location. Renya realizes he'd be monster food in 10 minutes and wonders about his past life. Lorna asks how long he has been in this world. He replies that he just arrived. She is amazed that he is so composed and capable right after being summoned. Cheyenne agrees, noting that most strays are confused, but he defeated trained soldiers. Lorna leans in close to Renya, playfully suggesting he use her first name. She holds his gaze with a sweet, hopeful smile, awaiting his response. Renya, flustered, avoids the advance by asking why they are in this forest. Lorna touches her cheek with a small pout, murmuring her disappointment. Cheyenne explains they are adventurers from Trident on a guild-sanctioned mission. Renya learns they are here because of increased goblin attacks on a pioneer village. He checks his system's help file, confirming goblins are weak but dangerous in groups. He questions if the two of them are handling this goblin subjugation mission alone. Cheyenne looks down sadly, revealing that their party originally had 8 members. Renya realizes with a start that the mercenaries' victims were their companions. An image of 6 men with halos confirms they were the rest of the party. Cheyenne trembles with fury, calling their fallen comrades a bunch of cheapskates. Lorna suggests Renya should go to the village and catch a carriage to safety. Renya turns the question back on them, asking what their own plans are. Cheyenne declares with firm resolve that they will stay and finish the investigation. Lorna explains that abandoning the mission now is simply not an option for them. Cheyenne adds that if they do nothing, the village will suffer the consequences. Renya stands back, thoughtfully observing their determination in this dire situation. After a moment of thought, he announces that he will help them with their job. Cheyenne objects, stating he isn't in the guild and won't get any reward. Renya dismisses her concerns, asking only for information about this world in return. She remains hesitant, feeling the price for risking his life is far too low. He insists it's a good deal, as information is priceless to him right now. Lorna winks at a worried Cheyenne, assuring her that Renya is a good person. Cheyenne, though still uncertain, seems to accept the arrangement. Renya reflects that his new life has truly begun, alongside 2 beautiful women. The newly formed trio walks together down a path through the dense woods. In the distance, they spot a small pioneer village nestled in a clearing. Cheyenne happily points out the village as they draw closer. She explains that this small settlement is their current base of operations. Lorna remarks on how remarkably calm Renya is for someone so young. She observes that he appears to be around the same age as them. Renya thinks to himself that no one would believe his mind is 94 years old. This thought about his past life triggers a memory of how he was reincarnated. A goddess appears in a shower of confetti, congratulating him on his new life. She giggles with pure delight, asking if he isn't happy about the news. With a snap of her fingers, she summons a choir of angels to sing. She formally announces that Kariya Renya passed away at the age of 94. She then complains that dealing with senile old men is such a hassle for her. Winking, she explains she conveniently reset his body and mind to age 18. She asks him how it feels to be young again, expecting him to be thrilled. Frustrated, Renya is shown delivering a swift punch to the annoying goddess. He yells at her to stop messing around and get on with the explanation. He angrily demands to know where he is and what is going on. The goddess pouts, annoyed that she has to stop her celebration. She regains her composure, introducing the place as the land of the gods. Renya stares back, completely unimpressed by her grand, divine presentation. She notes his lackluster reaction before clearing her throat to continue her speech. Winking again, she tells him he's being sent to another world for a second life. Renya is shocked, muttering the words, "another world," in utter disbelief. When he asks why, she declares it is because his soul was the chosen one. She explains that the barrier separating worlds is extremely dangerous to cross. A normal soul would be instantly annihilated upon touching the powerful wall. She points at him, stating his soul is one of the few strong enough to endure. She proudly announces he is the one, in 5.63 billion candidate who was chosen. Renya remains silent and unmoved by her grand declaration of his rarity. Rubbing his temples in exhaustion, he agrees to at least hear what she has to say. He cuts to the chase, asking what she intends to do with such a rare soul. The goddess feigns innocence, asking what he means by "do something." An awkward silence hangs between the two of them in the vast, empty space. Renya grabs her, shouting at her not to play games with a dead man. She yelps in pain, insisting there is a legitimate reason for all of this. He menacingly demands a good reason for bringing him back from a satisfying death. She gets serious, explaining he must supplement the new world's resources. Renya is confused, questioning what she means by the term resources. She clarifies it is the life force of the world, its souls, earth, and water. Pointing to a map, she reveals the world of Aldra faces a severe resource shortage. She shows a diagram of the world's 5 major races who are constantly at war. These races, like humans and demons, are always fighting over their borders. She explains that each of these races is overseen by a godlike manager. However, 5 of these managers are corruptly manipulating their races into conflict. Renya puts her in a headlock, demanding she use her power to stop them. She explains that she can't, having already delegated her authority to them. He asks why she can't do anything, reminding her that she is the creator god. She sweats nervously, admitting that a direct intervention would destroy the world. Renya yells at her to abdicate her position, which she frantically refuses to do. He demands to know how this endless fighting relates to the resource shortage. The flustered goddess prepares to explain the core of the world's problem. She shows a diagram of the reincarnation cycle, the world's primary resource. In this world, people suffer brutal deaths, such as being eaten by dragons. They are also slaughtered by monsters like orcs and goblins in horrific ways. The trauma of these deaths is so profound that a censored image is shown. She explains that souls are now refusing to be reborn, shrinking the resource pool. She holds a flickering soul, lamenting that she cannot persuade the dead to return. Her ultimate goal is to reason with the managers and fix the world's problems. However, she admits that convincing them will take a great deal of time. She pleads with Renya to go there, as his soul will act as a stopgap. Renya understands but sees no personal benefit in accepting her request. She desperately clings to him, begging him to go as he is their only hope. She wails that good citizens, beautiful women, and even babies are suffering. She continues to cry comically while hanging off of Renya's back. Renya, unmoved, asks for her real, honest reason for choosing him. She winks cheekily, admitting it would be a huge pain to find another candidate. Renya holds her up by her head, calling her reasoning an absolute joke. He tells her that if she is a god, she needs to give him a proper incentive. The goddess nervously agrees, trying to think of a suitable offer. She tempts him with the power of a demon lord and world domination. Renya shouts that he has absolutely no interest in ruling anything. The goddess is flustered, realizing her power fantasy offer was a total failure. She pivots, recalling he was a gourmet and tempting him with exotic new foods. The goddess tempts him with the world's exotic foods to enrich his new life. Renya admits that the prospect of gourmet food has indeed caught his interest. The goddess senses she's close to a deal, but he says it's not enough. She pouts, but Renya confirms that his terms have not yet been met. He argues a simple food-finding skill isn't a worthy cheat for saving a world. The goddess's demeanor shifts, she sits back, stating she has considered his compensation. The negotiation finally begins in earnest, her tone now serious as she prepares to ask. She formally asks Kariya Renya what kind of power he truly desires for himself. The memory fades as Cheyenne's voice calls his name, pulling him back to the present. He turns, dazed, and Cheyenne asks if he was even listening to her. In the pioneer village, he reflects on what they were just discussing. Cheyenne insists that facing a goblin horde with only a bamboo sword is too dangerous. Renya acknowledges her point, but states that the shurnai is all he possesses. Cheyenne argues that while he has an attachment to it, goblins are a serious threat. She explains his blunt weapon has limited options and might break mid-fight. Lorna adds that considering Renya's skill, she doesn't think it would be a problem. Cheyenne counters that a proper slashing weapon would make the investigation easier. She reveals sacks of equipment from their fallen comrades, lamenting their poor gear. They decide to at least use the smelly clothes as fuel for the stove. Renya offers a silent prayer for the dead, finding their fate a cruel one. Cheyenne concludes that the only option is to give him one of their spare weapons. Lorna agrees, reasoning that as a stray person, he wouldn't mind the circumstances. Cheyenne offers him a Western-style longsword, urging him to take it. He takes the sword, testing its weight as Cheyenne asks for his opinion. Renya concedes that the craftsmanship of the sword seems solid enough. However, he notes it lacks the cutting edge of a Japanese sword, feeling more for smashing. Cheyenne points out that the hilt is quite valuable and intricately designed. She explains the hilt is an heirloom, apologizing that the blade is a replacement. Renya accepts it gratefully, saying a sword is a sword, before it vanishes from his hand. Cheyenne and Lorna are shocked, realizing he possesses the rare item box skill. He confirms he stored it, and Cheyenne explains how rare the ability is. Lorna notes how envious she is, as he can now carry heavy luggage with ease. Renya offers to carry their equipment on the way back, which would be a great help. He agrees, but says they must first complete the goblin investigation safely. Suddenly, his head whips toward the window, his senses on high alert. Cheyenne asks what's wrong, but he admits he doesn't know for sure. He can feel a distinct presence coming from deep within the forest. He wonders if it's a skill unique to stray people, but he trusts his intuition. Cheyenne peers outside but sees nothing in the darkness of the woods. Renya calls out to Lorna, requesting her assistance with a sharp "lo." Lorna steps forward, preparing to use her divine art to locate the disruptive presence. She prays to her god to guide her senses and reveal the disturbance. A wave of golden energy pulses out from her, covering the entire village. The divine pulse extends far into the dark, surrounding forest. Her eyes snap open, she confirms something with hostile intent is indeed out there. She reveals there is a considerable number, though she can't be certain how many. She estimates a force of 50, perhaps even more beyond her detection range. Renya asks Cheyenne what this means, as Lorna glows with residual divine energy. Lorna explains her divine art of detection allows her to sense hostile intent. Cheyenne is alarmed, realizing a group of 50 is far larger than a normal goblin party. She and Lorna agree that for such a large horde to form is bad news. They deduce that a goblin leader must be commanding such a large, organized force. Cheyenne gulps, the gravity of the impending invasion setting in. She immediately orders Lorna to alert the village chief and prepare for battle. Cheyenne then turns to Renya, asking for his help, knowing they can't escape this. Renya looks out the window at the dark tree line, assessing the situation. He agrees the enemy is eager to fight, and Cheyenne notes a scouting line is useless. Lorna reports they only have 10 men capable of fighting in the village. Renya and Cheyenne agree that with such a disparity in numbers, victory seems difficult. Renya asks what happens if they lose, a question Cheyenne doesn't want to consider. The grim fate of being devoured by monsters flashes through his mind. He remembers the goddess explaining how such trauma can make souls refuse reincarnation. Renya muses about the fun future ahead, which prompts Cheyenne to tell him to stop joking. She tells him that this is no laughing matter, her voice laced with fear. Renya's expression darkens as he states a fight is always more fun when you're at a disadvantage. Cheyenne looks at him, a bead of sweat on her face, her voice trembling. "Hey, Renya, why are you smiling?" she asks, horrified by his predatory grin. From the darkness of the forest, dozens of glowing, malevolent eyes appear. The goblin horde emerges from the tree line, a chittering, screeching mass. As dusk settles, Renya confirms that the night raid has begun. The presence from the forest grows stronger, confirming Lorna's divination was correct. Renya hefts a borrowed woodcutting axe as a villager trembles beside him. Cheyenne takes stock of their meager forces, herself, Lorna, and the nervous villagers. She counts 12 villagers, 2 runaway adventurers, and Renya, the stray person. Their enemy is a horde of at least 50 goblins, likely led by a commander. Renya notes the absolute, overwhelming disparity in their combat power. Cheyenne asks if he's used to such situations, surprised by his calm demeanor. He replies that he doesn't know due to his amnesia, but feels they'll manage. Lorna comments on his incredible confidence, finding it somewhat reassuring. An arrow suddenly whistles past, embedding itself in the ground before them. The villagers cry out in panic as the first volley of arrows rains down. Renya grins as the attack begins, remarking that the party has started. He mutters to himself, a hint of excitement in his voice. The goblin horde charges, a chittering mass that seems far too large to handle. Cheyenne bellows at the villagers to return fire, not to falter in their response. The villagers panic, their movements clumsy and their aim unsteady. Their arrows fly wide, a desperate but ineffective counterattack against the charge. The goblin horde advances, their enemies' arrows clattering uselessly at their feet. Cheyenne curses, realizing the villagers are too inexperienced to even slow the enemy down. Renya lets out a soft, almost amused laugh at the chaos. He tells Cheyenne to keep up the ranged attack while he goes to cut in. Cheyenne is momentarily confused by his sudden, reckless command. Before she can object, he charges alone towards the oncoming horde. The goblins continue their advance, their enemies' arrows falling short. Renya closes the distance with terrifying speed, a blur of motion. He crashes into the front line, his heavy axe swinging in a brutal arc. The lead goblin's head is separated from its body in a spray of black blood. A terrifying, predatory grin spreads across Renya's face as he relishes the first kill. He pivots instantly, bringing the axe around to smash another goblin to the ground. The nearby goblins freeze, their faces masks of shock and confusion at his ferocity. Renya smirks, observing the villagers struggling against the goblins. He asks to join the fight, seeing they could use the help. A horde of screeching goblins leaps forward, their crude weapons raised high. From the village wall, Cheyenne watches in horror, calling Renya a reckless fool. She wonders if he has a death wish for charging in all alone. Lorna shouts a warning to Cheyenne as another group of goblins charges them. Cheyenne curses in frustration as she and Lorna prepare for the oncoming wave. Now in the thick of the fight, Renya swings his borrowed woodcutting axe. He moves with incredible speed, a blur of motion cutting through the chaos. With a powerful swing, he cleaves a goblin with the heavy axe. He parries a goblin spear thrust, the impact sending sparks flying from the blade. A goblin with a crude club charges, its face a mask of rage. Renya easily blocks the club with the flat of his axe, utterly unimpressed. He kicks the goblin away, noting the axe is already getting dull. He concludes the axe's cutting edge is gone, deciding on a new tactic. With a vicious grin, he declares he will simply beat them to a pulp. He taunts the surrounding goblins, asking why they're holding back from him. His grin widens as he bellows that he came all this way for them. He points his sword, reminding them that he is their true enemy. He shouts that the one they must kill is right here before them. He rests his sword on his shoulder, daring them to come and get him. Cheyenne lets out a frustrated cry as she is overwhelmed by the goblins. She desperately blocks a goblin spear, Lorna watching intently from behind. Lorna raises her priestess's mace, preparing to intervene in the fight. She brings the mace down hard on a goblin's head with a sickening crunch. A goblin slips past Cheyenne's guard, its dagger aimed right at her side. Cheyenne grits her teeth, barely managing to parry the surprise attack. A goblin snarls viciously as it presses its advantage against the struggling swordswoman. Cheyenne realizes that simply cutting them down one by one is getting her nowhere. Suddenly, she has an idea, a new strategy forming in her mind. Remembering Renya's efficient movements, she finds a new resolve. That's it. A goblin lunges forward, its face contorted in a vicious snarl. Cheyenne smiles, realizing a thrusting attack would be far more effective. In a moment of panic, she realizes her mistake. Damn it. The goblin's blade gets stuck in her armor, a fatal error for the creature. The goblin looks down, confused, seeing its sword embedded and useless. Lorna takes the opening, smashing the goblin's chest with her mace. Lorna calmly tells a stunned Cheyenne that her resolve is still too soft. Cheyenne pants, apologizing to Lorna and thanking her for the timely save. Lorna replies that it's too early for thanks, as they're not safe yet. They stand back to back, ready to face the horde, united in their fight. Renya unleashes a volley of spinning throwing discs in a surprise attack. A goblin is struck in the throat, collapsing with a choked gurgle. Another goblin leaps from the side, dagger raised to strike Renya. Renya's axe blocks the dagger, the impact ringing loudly through the air. The axe shatters under the force of the blow, breaking apart in his hand. Renya calmly looks at the broken hilt, thinking he should have gotten it sooner. A massive shadow falls over him as a new, larger foe appears. Renya smirks, noting that a tough-looking enemy has finally shown up. The hulking goblin leader stomps forward, asking if Renya is the commander. The goblin leader lets out a deafening, furious roar of pure challenge. The two leaders stand off in the center of the chaotic battlefield. Cheyenne stares in horror at the massive creature. That's... She screams for Renya to run, warning him that it's the goblin leader. Renya smirks from the battlefield, telling her not to be so stupid. He states that if he kills this one, the rest of the horde will run. The goblin leader charges, enraged by Renya's dismissive taunts. It brings its massive cleaver down in a powerful overhead swing. Renya thinks the attack is too slow, but notes his dodge was shallow. He is shocked as the leader's arms seem to stretch unnaturally long. He leaps back just in time, the blade smashing the ground where he stood. He calmly assesses the attack, noting how surprisingly heavy it felt. He realizes the leader uses its long arms to maximize its reach and power. He notes that despite the leader's reach, his own range is much shorter. The two combatants rush towards each other once more, a blur of motion. The leader unleashes a wide, horizontal sweep aimed at Renya's waist. Renya ducks low, thinking that an attack that doesn't hit is meaningless. He easily slips under the blade, dismissing the telegraphed attack as useless. From behind, a smaller goblin leaps in to attack Renya's blind spot. Renya senses the second attacker instantly. Another one behind me. The smaller goblin's dagger is stopped cold by Renya's bare hand. Renya effortlessly catches the goblin's wrist, completely halting its attack. In a fluid motion, he plunges his own knife into the goblin's neck. The blade sinks deep, a spray of black blood erupting from the wound. The goblin leader watches in shock as its subordinate is used against it. Renya uses the smaller goblin's body to get inside the leader's guard. He drives his knife deep into the goblin leader's exposed abdomen. The leader bellows in pain and shock from the devastating surprise wound. Renya kicks off the leader's chest, sending it stumbling backwards. He notes that the leader's lower body is now useless, its muscles severed. He stands over the fallen leader, taunting its predictable, telegraphed swings. He holds the leader's own massive sword, stating that it's over now. He brings the blade down, cleaving the leader's head from its shoulders. He stands over the twitching corpse. Well then, he says calmly. He hefts the massive sword, stating that he's procured his new weapon. His face splits into a terrifying grin. Shall we start again? He asks. The villagers watch the carnage, wondering if this is really another world. Lorna and Cheyenne watch Renya, realizing he wants even more bloodshed. Renya savors the feeling of his enemies breaking before his might. He wants to see their faces twisted in absolute pain and terror. He swings the massive sword, demanding that they entertain him even more. He roars, a true demon of the battlefield, ready to revel in the slaughter. The long night of battle finally begins to come to an end. The first light of dawn breaks over the dark, silhouetted forest. Lorna walks through the corpse-strewn battlefield, asking if Cheyenne is still alive. Cheyenne, exhausted and battered, replies that she somehow managed to survive. Lorna looks at Cheyenne, her expression grim and weary from the long fight. They both look towards a lone figure silhouetted against the rising sun. Lorna concludes that they were saved entirely because of him and his power. Renya stands alone amidst the dead, the battle won, a new day dawning. In the ethereal plane, Renya grabs the goddess, roaring that he is fed up. The creator god muses to herself that erasing his past life's memories was a mistake. She recalls a vision of him easily slaughtering a horde of 100 goblins. Returning to their negotiation, she asks what kind of abilities Renya desires. Renya declares that since he's getting a young body, he wants his health back. The goddess is stunned, confirming he desires health before any special powers. He explains that his hobbies of good food and drink require a strong constitution. The goddess sweats nervously at his passionate outburst about hating his old, frail body. Renya thoughtfully considers what other skills he might need to earn a living. He is confident his body remembers how to fight, so that won't be an issue. The goddess looks at her notes, recalling that he was a master of swordsmanship. Renya, having no memory of this, is surprised to learn of his supposed skill. He notes the world lacks Japanese swords, so the goddess offers him blacksmithing skills. He then expresses a casual interest in trying magic, which the goddess demonstrates. A divine screen appears, offering him a choice of magical elemental affinities. He asks whether he should prioritize raw destructive power or the number of uses. He decides on quantity, reasoning an attack that misses is completely meaningless. With a smirk, he states he can train his new young body to be strong. The goddess smiles, saying such a simple request is child's play for her. As a bonus, she offers to add support skills like otherworldly language proficiency. She prepares to grant him all of his requested abilities immediately. A system message announces that Renya has successfully acquired the grace of the god. The goddess informs him that all the abilities he requested are now usable. She muses that his instincts alone make him brutally efficient, even without magic. She decides she will wait patiently to see how her champion develops. She has faith that Renya will be able to handle whatever comes his way. The scene shifts to the grim, body-strewn aftermath of the battle at the village. Cheyenne says that of the village's defenders, it is a miracle anyone survived. She looks on, admitting that this miracle was almost entirely Renya's doing. In the distance, Renya is seen callously dragging a goblin corpse by its head. Lorna remarks on his incredible mental and physical toughness after such a fight. Renya, now shirtless, wonders if all stray people are like him. Cheyenne and Lorna agree that his aid was a tremendous help to them. Lorna clutches her chest, her resolve hardening as she decides she must have him. Renya stands before a massive funeral pyre he has built from goblin corpses. Lorna explains the need to burn the bodies to prevent them from becoming undead. With the pyre ready, Lorna calls over to Cheyenne to do her part. Cheyenne steps forward, chanting as she gathers crackling magical energy in her hands. A bright, swirling ball of fire forms between her outstretched palms. Renya and Lorna watch, Renya surprised that Cheyenne is the one to light it. Lorna clarifies that as a priestess in training, her own abilities are different. She can use divine arts by borrowing a god's power, but not sorcery. Renya admits his surprise, having thought Cheyenne was just a manual laborer. Enraged, Cheyenne snaps back that anyone can learn basic, everyday life sorcery. She retorts not to call her a meathead, though magic isn't her specialty. Renya thoughtfully strokes his chin, realizing he forgot to ask the goddess for magic. He wonders aloud if it's even possible for a stray person to use it. Cheyenne proudly offers to introduce him to a sorcerer when they return to Klefkul. Renya holds up a bag, asking what to do with the goblin magic stones. Lorna explains the stones serve as proof of subjugation for the Adventurers Guild. She adds they also power magical devices, though they are useless to them personally. Cheyenne suddenly exclaims, having spotted something approaching on the road. She announces that the scheduled carriage from Klefkul appears to have arrived. A caravan of covered wagons rumbles through the forest, delayed by recent events. Cheyenne triumphantly announces their arrival at their home base, the city of Klefkul. She explains that the city has a modest population of around 10,000 people. It serves as a critical frontier outpost near the dangerous Forest of Bewilderment. The city is defended by 2,000 elite soldiers from the Duchy of Trident. Renya and Lorna quietly take in the sights of the bustling commercial city. Renya observes the training soldiers with a critical eye, murmuring about their elite status. He notes that for such a force, the city's defensive walls seem rather weak. Suddenly, two sharp spear points cross directly in front of his face. The city guards block his path, demanding identification from the unfamiliar man. Cheyenne rushes forward to apologize, explaining that Renya is a stray person. Lorna smoothly presents her own card, vouching for Renya as their companion. The flustered guard immediately apologizes and allows them to pass. Renya walks by with a knowing smirk, his opinion of the elite guards confirmed. Cheyenne understands his look, confirming that he saw right through them. She wonders aloud if it's common for adventurers to be so well known. Lorna suggests that Renya should register with the Adventurers Guild for his own good. Renya is taken aback, questioning why he would need to do such a thing. Lorna explains that the guild card is the fastest way to get official identification. Cheyenne agrees, saying it's the perfect time since they're heading there anyway. Renya's eyes narrow, realizing he is being skillfully maneuvered into this decision. Lorna thinks to herself that she is successfully guiding him along her intended path. At the guild, they begin their report for the Forest of Bewilderment investigation. The receptionist is confused, noting the quest was registered for an 8-person party. Cheyenne confirms they need to report, and the receptionist asks if there was trouble. The receptionist directs the two women to a back room for their debriefing. She then asks Renya to handle his registration while he waits for them. She slides an Adventurers Guild registration form across the counter toward him. Renya is shocked to see the entire application is written in Japanese. The receptionist admits she can't read it, but assures him it will work. He realizes his divine language skill is making it appear as Japanese to him. He begins to read the guild regulations listed on the form, his eyes widening. The 4 main rules are surprisingly simple and straightforward for an adventurer. He comments on how incredibly simple the core rules are. The receptionist explains those are just the basics, the full regulations are extensive. She takes his completed form with a professional smile, confirming it's been accepted. She asks Renya Kusugi to wait a moment while his card is being made. He reflects on how easy it was, feeling a sense of gratitude. He turns to see that Cheyenne and Lorna have finished their meeting. He approaches them and asks if their business is now concluded. Cheyenne confirms it was difficult, but they successfully received their reward. She proudly presents a pile of 12 glittering gold coins as their payment. Lorna explains the reward was increased because of the unexpected number of goblins. Cheyenne then moves on to the most important part of their discussion. She announces that she and Lorna have decided to give half the reward to Renya. Renya immediately objects, exclaiming that it is far too much money. Cheyenne insists, saying he saved them and helped them complete their mission. Lorna thinks back to the goblin horde, crediting Renya with their victory. She tells Cheyenne she wishes they could give Renya a larger reward. Cheyenne, stealing her resolve, declares that she has a request for Renya. With determination, Cheyenne asks Renya to officially join their adventuring party. Renya is caught completely off guard by her sudden, direct invitation. Lorna calmly sips her tea, observing the scene with quiet amusement. Cheyenne explains that she needs a dependable person like him in their party. Lorna agrees, admitting it is difficult for two women to adventure alone. Renya is skeptical, questioning how they can trust him so readily. Cheyenne insists he is trustworthy, as he didn't flee from the goblins. Renya considers his deal with them, seeing the efficiency of joining a party. He acknowledges that having companions would be helpful, but he remains hesitant. His eyes show deep consideration as he weighs the significant decision. Lorna watches him, her expression calm and waiting for his answer. Renya tells them he needs until the next morning to make his decision. Night falls over the inn as Renya contemplates the important offer. Alone in his room, Renya attempts to wash away the day's grime. He laments the lack of a proper bath, a comfort he misses. In the adjacent room, Cheyenne looks concerned, holding her blade. Lorna also looks troubled, her hand resting on her priestess's mace. Cheyenne tells Lorna that while Renya seems good, she is still curious. Lorna agrees, feeling as though Renya is hiding something from them. A sudden knock at his door interrupts Renya's quiet evening thoughts. Startled by the sound, he calls out to see who is there. Lorna's voice answers, asking if she can speak with him privately. Renya tells her to come in, casually mentioning the door is unlocked. The wooden door slowly creaks open, revealing the late-night visitor. Renya stares in shock as Lorna enters wearing a revealing nightgown. Her face is flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and nervous resolve. She quietly slips past him, moving further into the small room. With a sudden move, she pushes the surprised Renya back onto the bed. Leaning over him, she asks if he understands her clear intentions. Her heart pounds audibly as she holds herself above him. Renya is completely flustered, his face blushing at their proximity. Lorna's expression is a mix of vulnerability and determined seduction. She pins him to the mattress, her body pressing against his. He can only stare, completely overwhelmed by the sudden, intimate situation. She leans down, her face now just inches away from his. Renya's shock begins to turn into confusion and suspicion. A sly, knowing smile appears on Lorna's face as she watches him. She whispers for him not to be rough, her hands on his chest. She teasingly asks if he will force her to state her intentions. She offers herself to him, promising to serve him well from now on. She playfully asks if he thought she was just a naive girl. With a gentle smile, she tells him a woman's heart is complex. Renya listens, a bead of sweat on his face as he understands. She leans in once more, telling him not to hold back. A soft chuckle escapes her lips as she prepares to close the gap. She whispers that she likes honest men, her lips almost touching his. In a flash, Renya's hand shoots up, grabbing the back of her head. Her eyes widen in pure shock, her advance completely halted. Renya's expression is now serious, the moment of passion broken. He holds her there, his face completely unreadable and calm. Lorna looks at him, confused and unsure of what will happen next. Later, Renya sits fully dressed while Lorna lies on the bed. Lorna slowly sits up, the awkward silence hanging between them. He sits across from her, his posture calm and businesslike. Mortified, Lorna asks if her plan failed, admitting she thought it would work. Renya explains his 94-year-old mind prevented his young body from reacting. Lorna stares blankly, unable to process his bizarre explanation. When she asks who is 94, Renya simply points to himself. Lorna flails on the bed, laughing and calling his excuse unfair. Renya sighs, stating he has no time for jokes, though it wasn't one. He decides to move on, turning the conversation to her true motives. He asks her to reveal her real objective for coming to his room. Lorna sits up, stating plainly she wants him to accept Cheyenne's offer. Renya challenges her, asking what she will do if he refuses. Lorna simply smiles, her expression confident and a little sly. She insists that, personally, she absolutely needs him to join them. Renya wonders why she is so focused on him specifically. Lorna coyly says it's because she's set her sights on him. She recalls his skill in the goblin battle, as Cheyenne also mentioned. She also notes he is a good person who protects women in trouble. Lastly, she was impressed he showed no inappropriate desire towards them. Renya accuses her of trying to trap him, which she playfully admits. He accepts she has a hidden agenda, but sets it aside for now. He tells her he has his own questions that need answering first. Lorna smiles, confidently telling him that she is ready to listen. He prepares to lay out his first point of suspicion against them. He found it strange that 2 women were with 6 men like that. He also notes that one of them wore clothes that emphasized her body. He asks if all priests in this world dress in such a manner. Lorna teases him for noticing, calling him naughty for looking so closely. He points out their full names suggest they are from noble families. He then brings up the ornate sword he borrowed from Cheyenne. While the blade is plain, the hilt is a magnificent family heirloom. Using such a precious item as a spare is too extravagant for anyone normal. He identifies the intricate design on the hilt as a family crest. Lorna feigns surprise, teasingly asking if he plans to sell it. As Renya prepares his third point, Lorna seems surprised he has more. He insists there is, revealing this point bothered him the most. He recalls the strange, overly flustered reaction of the city guards. It was too unnatural to let him in on their word alone. He concludes there must be another reason for their special treatment. Lorna jokes the guards were simply captivated by her feminine charm. He states that while there are more issues, those are the main ones. Lorna asks what he intends to do now that he knows all this. He deduces they are high-status individuals hiding their identities for complex reasons. He believes this is why they are involved in such dangerous matters. Lorna looks away, her composure finally broken by his accurate deductions. Renya sits across from Lorna, stating he cannot get involved in her suspicious affairs. A tense, silent moment passes between them, their sharp gazes locked in negotiation. Lorna sighs softly, her gaze drifting toward the empty hallway. She runs a hand through her hair, admitting her careful plans have gone awry. Renya tells her it's fine, as he expected the truth to surface eventually. Lorna notes that his world-weary confidence is what makes him seem so trustworthy. She begins her confession, revealing Cheyenne is from a certain noble bloodline. Renya presses her, correctly guessing that she is not a simple priest in training. Lorna smiles sheepishly, admitting her true occupation is serving as Cheyenne's bodyguard. She proudly boasts she could easily defeat 6 mercenaries with her bare hands. Renya asks about Cheyenne, realizing she would have been helpless on her own. His eyes widen as he begins to understand the full scope of the deception. Lorna confirms with a sly smile that she orchestrated the crisis for Cheyenne's benefit. Renya pictures a cliché scene of Lorna trying to drag a runaway Cheyenne home. Lorna denies it, but admits her frustration with Cheyenne led her to kill the mercenaries. She explains that if Renya joins them, everything will become much clearer. Renya clutches his head, lamenting the troublesome situation he's found himself in. He asks the crucial question, if Cheyenne is also aware of Lorna's plotting. Lorna assures him Cheyenne is innocent and truly believes she needs his help. She explains she must act secretly from the shadows, a task Renya now understands. Lorna muses that his presence will make her life easier, much to his annoyance. He considers her offer, admitting that having help would make earning money easier. Lorna makes a final, playful move, offering herself to him before telling him to leave. Feigning tears, she threatens to run through the inn screaming his name. Completely defeated, Renya sighs and agrees to give her plan a try. A radiant, blushing smile blossoms on Lorna's face as she thanks him. She asks him to be gentle, only for him to yell at her to get out. The next morning, Renya's calm demeanor shatters with a single, roared demand for money. At the breakfast table, he fumes that he needs a substantial and regular income. Cheyenne is completely baffled by his sudden and intense outburst of anger. He rants that he needs a proper base of operations, not their current squalor. His complaints escalate, the food is terrible, the bed is awful, and there's no bath. Cheyenne is confused by his lecture, but Lorna explains his Japanese sensibilities are offended. Renya's demand for a proper house, not a rental, leaves Cheyenne completely stunned. Cheyenne asks Lorna if he's serious, but Lorna admits she doesn't know the details. After his tirade, Renya calmly explains that his plan to go it alone was naive. Cheyenne listens with a confused but focused expression, trying to follow his logic. He states that finding trustworthy companions from scratch would be far too difficult. He concludes that it is much easier to team up with those who know the world. Cheyenne stammers, slowly beginning to understand where his explanation is heading. With a serious expression, Renya prepares to state his final decision. He points directly at them and declares that he is joining their party. Cheyenne's face breaks into a blushing, trembling expression of pure, unadulterated joy. Lorna watches the scene unfold with a quiet and deeply satisfied smile. Cheyenne lunges across the table, grabbing Renya's hands and thanking him profusely. She chatters excitedly that a proper base of operations is essential for them. Admitting her own limits, she is relieved their goals have finally aligned with his. Lorna tells Cheyenne how glad she is, admitting she was at her wit's end. Cheyenne gets carried away, suggesting she can now take Renya home to her family. She quickly snaps back to reality with a sheepish, embarrassed expression. She nervously changes the subject as Lorna facepalms at her lack of subtlety. Renya, sensing something is off, asks if there are any other party members. Cheyenne's nervous denial only deepens Renya's growing feeling of unease. As Cheyenne suggests sorcery training, Renya reflects on his strange new life goal. In a book-filled study, a woman begins to deliver her professional assessment. Kruar equals Valier, a master sorcerer, reveals Renya's natural attribute is wind. However, she bluntly states his mana is abysmally low, less than half of normal. She notes that while the color of his mana is rare, its quantity is lacking. Holding a diagnostic orb to his chest, she points out how small the light is. She demonstrates her own power, causing an orb to glow with brilliant, dazzling light. The light from her orb is so intense that it crackles with raw power. Cheyenne mutters that her own test only produced a faint, unimpressive glow. Kruar explains that while training helps, his starting point is very poor. Renya asks if there is any effective method to train his mana capacity. With a cool expression, Kruar holds out her hand and demands 7 silver coins. Cheyenne cheerfully pays the fee, thanking the sorcerer for her business. Kruar instructs Renya to give her his hand to begin the process. She takes the coins from his palm, preparing to perform the magical ritual. With a surge of power, she announces she will grant him the light spell. A magical sigil burns itself onto a piece of parchment before it vanishes. Renya watches in awe as the parchment crumbles into glowing embers. A system message appears before him, asking him to accept the new spell. He accepts the spell, leaving Cheyenne and Kruar confused by his unseen interface. Kruar, now relaxing in her chair, provides the simple incantation for light. Renya holds out his hand, ready to attempt his very first spell. Kruar lectures that the only way to increase mana is through constant use. Renya asks about his supposed talent for wind sorcery. Cheyenne immediately dismisses the idea as useless, much to Renya's annoyance. She claims that even if he learned it, he wouldn't be able to use it. Kruar slyly offers to teach him wind magic later, for another fee. Leaving the study, Cheyenne walks down the street, humming a cheerful tune. Renya follows a few paces behind, observing her with a curious expression. He calls out, asking why she seems to be in such a good mood. She admits she was worried that he might be good at everything. She gleefully declares them magic dud buddies, earning a shove from Renya. Changing the subject, Renya states that he needs to focus on training. He asks to postpone taking quests for a few days, much to Cheyenne's surprise. He explains that he doesn't have a good grasp of his own abilities yet. Cheyenne is confused, asking how he can be unaware of his own performance. Renya confesses that he lost most of his memories when he arrived in this world. Cheyenne is shocked, recalling how composed he seemed when they first met. She remembers he confidently introduced himself as a stray person from the start. Renya internally admits he's bluffing but decides to stick with the amnesia story. Cheyenne concludes that being a stray person is a very strange and mysterious thing. Renya explains he needs to understand his capabilities for the party's future. Understanding his reasoning, Cheyenne agrees to show him a good place to train. The next morning, the sun rises over the city as birds begin to chirp. Renya stretches outside the city gate, ready to test his physical limits first. Cheyenne directs him to a barren wasteland to the north where he can train undisturbed. He takes off at an explosive speed, the ground cracking from the force of his sprint. He began to run, his new body a blur of motion against the landscape. A sudden thought struck him, his body felt impossibly light. He leaped effortlessly between boulders, feeling the power of his youthful form. Was this truly what it felt like to be young again? He soon arrived at the desolate ruins of the hermit's graveyard. To his surprise, he wasn't even out of breath, a fact he found deeply unsettling. Well then, he murmured to the empty wasteland, ready to begin his assessment. He drew the western longsword, its unfamiliar weight cutting through the air. His body moved with the muscle memory of a lifetime of training. He completed a series of practice swings, his form flawless and precise. But a deep dissatisfaction settled upon him as he examined the blade. This clumsy sword was useless as a true weapon, he would have to endure it. Unlike a katana, it was a smashing weapon, so he needn't worry about its durability. He vowed that once he had a home, he would forge a proper blade himself. With his sword skills tested, he let out a breath and considered what was next. He recalled Kruar's words, realizing he had to test his aptitude for magic. Something like this, he thought, extending his hand to gather his mana. His eyes narrowed in concentration as he tried to recall the incantation. My power becomes a spell, he chanted, O light, as energy began to form. But the nascent spell abruptly fizzled into nothingness, leaving him confused. The world plunged into darkness as a distant voice called out to him. His eyes snapped wide open in shock and disorientation. His blurry vision focused on a pair of white panties just above his face. A girl with cat-like ears leaned over him, asking if he was all right. She repeated her question, her face a mask of innocent concern. He had collapsed completely in the middle of the desolate wasteland. Lying on the ground, his mind struggled to process the situation. Suddenly, his combat instincts flared, his senses screaming with alarm. He scrambled backward, putting distance between himself and the strange girl. Who the hell are you? He demanded, as she stumbled on top of him. I'm a traveling merchant, she announced with a cheerful, unwavering smile. She explained that she had just been passing by and was glad he was unhurt. Renya pushed himself up, wondering if he had truly fainted. The girl confirmed that he had been unconscious for a short time. He concluded it must have been mana sickness from his failed spell. But a deep suspicion grew, he was sure he had been alone. He warned her to keep her distance, his hand resting on his sword. He questioned her story, pointing out she wasn't carrying any merchandise. A sly, confident glint appeared in the mysterious girl's eye. She cleared her throat dramatically, preparing for a grand announcement. I am Kiri, she declared, a super-rare merchant with an item box. She asked if he was impressed, he bluntly told her he was not. She insisted their meeting was fate, ignoring his demands that she listen. He sighed in frustration, realizing this girl was impossible to reason with. As she began her sales pitch, he plotted how to get rid of her. He was surprised to see she had somehow set up a full display of wares. She proudly presented a dagger, continuing her relentless sales pitch. A confident wink accompanied her claims of having the finest goods. He saw through her act, sensing her wares were fake and her story was a lie. But as he scanned her items, his eyes suddenly widened in shock. There, on a simple stand, was a weapon he never expected to see. A Japanese sword, he breathed, taking the long tachi in his hands. He could feel its quality instantly, it was a true masterpiece. He recalled the creator god telling him such blades didn't exist here. Kiri feigned surprise, asking if he knew what a nihanto was. She explained it was an antique from a stray, but no one could use it. With a sly wink, she offered to sell it to someone who appreciated its value. He gripped the hilt, the weapon feeling perfectly balanced in his hands. She asked if he liked it, offering him a special discount for their fated meeting. He knew it was a fine blade, but he had no money to his name. Kiri's eyes lit up with a sudden idea, realizing he must be a stray person. She eagerly proposed a trade, asking what he had brought from his world. Renya admitted he only possessed one thing, his bamboo practice sword. Her eyes widened with manic excitement, asking if it was a grade 10 artifact. He confirmed her suspicion, recalling the system's strange description. She inspected the shurnai, boasting that she was a discerning merchant. Then let's trade for this nihanto, she proposed, stunning him. He was hesitant, thinking the deal was far too lopsided to be real. His suspicion lingered, but the desire for a real sword was strong. She insisted, explaining collectors would pay fortunes for such a rare artifact. She had one condition, he had to demonstrate the shurnai's power first. She claimed it would be a learning experience for her future business. He agreed. With a flourish, she pointed to a thick stone pillar, declaring it the target. A confident smirk touched Renya's lips, he had wanted to test it anyway. He took his stance before the pillar, his entire demeanor sharpening. His face became a mask of pure killing intent as he prepared his strike. With a powerful kiai, he swung the bamboo sword in a blinding arc. For a split second, nothing happened, a thin line appearing on the stone. Kiri's eye widened in sheer, unadulterated shock and disbelief. With a deep groan, the massive stone pillar split cleanly in two. The top half crashed to the ground, shattering on impact. Kiri was speechless, stammering that she couldn't even see the blade move. Renya admired the shurnai, now genuinely wanting to keep the fine weapon. It's a deal. Kiri chirped, snatching the bamboo sword triumphantly. Renya was left holding the katana, a wry, satisfied smile on his face. Kiri thanked him for the trade, bidding him a cheerful farewell. She stopped, offering a final prophecy about his impending mana sickness. She added that the help of a great merchant would be a great asset. With a final, knowing wink, she assured him he'd master his magic soon. As she walked away, he realized she knew more than she let on. He thought her a strange girl, but was glad to have saved himself some trouble. The desolate landscape of the hermit's graveyard fell silent once more. Once out of sight, Kiri spoke into her wrist, identifying herself as Glire. She reported to her master that the mission was complete, the Shurnai was recovered. The creator god cheered, annoying Glire, who was tired of her master's antics. Glire erupted in fury over the convoluted plan and the god's carelessness. The divine Shurnai was far too powerful to be left in mortal hands. She accused her master of being the god of destruction for creating such a weapon. Their divine argument escalated into a comical, high-volume shouting match. The creator god turned away, fuming in a cloud of divine indignation. The creator god examines a photo of her pouting servant, Kiri, wondering if the exchange went as planned. A flashback shows Glire at a Japanese gravesite, confessing she borrowed Renya's beloved sword from the offerings. The goddess smiles, realizing that of course Renya's own ancestral sword would be the perfect weapon for him. She praises her servant, Glire, who formally reports in from the shadows, her tone less than enthusiastic. The goddess stifles a giggle, insisting to her servant that the mission was indeed a great success. The scene shifts from the divine realm to the exterior of the party's newly established home. Cheyenne bursts through the door with explosive energy, triumphantly announcing she has accepted a new quest. In the kitchen, Renya calmly continues his domestic task, wearing an apron and pouring a drink. As Cheyenne calls his name, he replies with a flat tone that he can already hear her. He rubs his temple, telling Cheyenne to go find Lorna so they can all hear the details together. A bowl of shiny red apples sits on the counter, a silent witness to the conversation. A steaming mug is set down on a wooden table with a soft clink, signaling the start of the meeting. The three adventurers sit together as Lorna begins, explaining the quest is a day's carriage ride to the south. Leaning in, Cheyenne excitedly adds that a brand new living dungeon has been discovered. An illustration shows a deep chasm, explaining a living dungeon is formed by a core that reshapes its environment. The core creates monsters and grows by absorbing the mana of fallen adventurers, a mysterious and dangerous cycle. Cheyenne stresses the urgency of the mission is to destroy the dungeon before it grows too powerful. Renya questions if their small party will be tackling this dangerous new dungeon by themselves. With a confident grin, Cheyenne announces that it will be a large joint operation with 4 parties in total. She excitedly lays out the plan, a 4-day mission with a generous reward of 10 gold coins. Renya and Lorna exchange a subtle, worried glance, a silent communication of their shared unease. Lorna cautiously notes that the terms of the quest seem fair enough on the surface. Cheyenne then drops the final piece of information: their departure is scheduled for the very next morning. The sudden news shocks both Renya and Lorna, who exclaim in unison about the impossibly short notice. Renya's patience snaps as he berates Cheyenne for impulsively accepting a quest without any prior thought. He angrily lists all the preparations and information gathering they need to do before leaving. He tells her that even if she is the leader, she is obligated to consult with them first. Cheyenne is utterly baffled by his statement, having never considered herself the party's leader. Lorna shares Cheyenne's confusion, equally surprised by Renya's assumption. Renya is stunned to realize that they have both been viewing him as their leader all along. Their expressions make it clear they believe Renya is the only one fit to lead them. Grabbing his hair in frustration, Renya argues that as a stray, he's the least qualified for the job. Lorna smoothly intervenes, stating that it would actually be a great help to her if Renya took charge. She lays out her flawless logic, explaining that Renya's leadership is essential for her to protect Cheyenne. Renya clutches his head, groaning as he realizes he has been perfectly and completely outmaneuvered. He sighs in resignation, placing his mug on the table and complaining of a headache. Now in command, Renya states that if he's the leader, they need proper time to prepare food and equipment. A thoroughly chastened Cheyenne looks down and apologizes, admitting she hadn't considered the logistics. Renya pointedly asks if she's truly grateful, since these are things she should have thought of herself. Lorna sips her drink with a look of quiet satisfaction, her plan having succeeded perfectly. Cheyenne can only manage a weak, embarrassed reply, still reeling from her scolding. Resigned to his fate, Renya scratches his head, acknowledging that the quest has been accepted. He begins delegating, assigning Lorna to handle the shopping since she is more familiar with the city. He then tells Cheyenne that they will go to the meeting, and asks if she has intel on the other parties. Cheyenne's spirits lift instantly, and she proudly proclaims that she knows all the major parties in town. She declares that this quest will be a great opportunity for them to show what they can do. The scene shifts to a large, multi-story building, identified by a sign as the Silver Goblet Tavern. Cheyenne proudly explains to Renya that this is the Silver Goblet, the tavern operated by the Adventurers Guild. The heavy wooden doors of the tavern creak open, revealing the crowded and noisy interior. Inside, various groups of adventurers are gathered at round tables, eating, drinking, and talking loudly. Renya and Cheyenne step into the lively tavern, taking a moment to survey the assembled adventurers. A close-up reveals the stern, scarred face of a heavily armored warrior, clearly a veteran. Another adventurer is shown, a young man with spiky red hair and a perpetually arrogant sneer. A third man sits with his eyes closed, his gray hair and calm demeanor suggesting a different kind of strength. The tavern sign, depicting a silver goblet crossed with a sword, hangs prominently outside. Cheyenne quietly observes that it appears all the parties for the joint operation have arrived. The armored man, Hars, stands and addresses the room, assuming everyone has been briefed by the guild. Renya leans over to Cheyenne, whispering to ask who this man is who has taken charge. Cheyenne identifies him as Hars equals Ryson, the leader of the adventurer party known as Crimson Bearer. She adds that he is a B-rank adventurer and a master of dual wielding, likely the strongest in the room. Renya confirms his understanding of the adventurers' guild ranking system. A pyramid diagram illustrates the ranks from S down to F, with a small arrow indicating their own lowly position. Cheyenne then points out the flamboyant red-haired man, Zest equals Fatarity, leader of Fang of the Azure Wolf. She explains that while he is officially C rank, his true skill is rumored to be on par with B rank. Renya observes Zest's arrogant posture, understanding the source of his abrasive attitude. Finally, Cheyenne identifies the last group, Seekers, led by the D-rank sorcerer, AZ equals Hound. She explains their unusual strategy relies on their front line holding off enemies while AZ casts powerful spells. Renya notes how well-informed she is, and she proudly confirms she always checks out the competition. He dryly compares her diligence to that of a devoted fan, and she puffs her cheeks in proud agreement. Suddenly, an aggressive voice from across the tavern shouts directly at them, demanding their attention. Renya and a startled Cheyenne turn to see who is yelling at them. It's Zest, his face twisted in a sneer as he points out that their party is incomplete. Renya calmly explains that their third member, a priestess, is currently out preparing for the mission. Zest's expression darkens with menace as he asks if Renya is looking down on him. One of Zest's companions tries to intervene, but Zest angrily tells him to shut his mouth. Renya attempts to de-escalate, apologizing if he caused offense and promising they will pull their weight. Zest scoffs, completely unconvinced by the newcomer's bold words. He points a finger at Renya, demanding that the last one to arrive should introduce himself first. Renya sighs, stating that he is Renya equals Kusugi, a recently registered adventurer, and that his party has no name. Zest immediately deduces that Renya must be F rank, a conclusion Hars quietly confirms is likely correct. Zest explodes in fury, questioning who allowed such F rank trash on the mission and threatening to kill them. Cheyenne slams her fists on the table, arguing that the quest had no rank or number restrictions. Zest turns his sneer on her, contemptuously asking who she is. Cheyenne stares back defiantly, introducing herself and stating that she is also F rank. The revelation sends Zest into a fit of mocking laughter, finding it hilarious that she's a rookie too. His laughter cuts off as he grips a heavy wine bottle with violent intent. In a blur of motion, he swings the bottle, preparing to smash it. The bottle violently collides with another he was holding, shattering it into a jagged weapon. Cheyenne watches in wide-eyed horror as the glass explodes in her direction. A hand flashes out with impossible speed, moving to intercept the attack. Renya's hand clamps down on Zest's wrist, stopping the broken bottle just short of Cheyenne's face. From across the table, a woman from Zest's party prepares to make her own move. In the same instant, Renya's free hand has already snatched an intact bottle from the table. He places the new bottle down calmly, his movements a blur of impossible speed. Zest's face is a mask of twitching rage and disbelief, his assault completely neutralized. One of Zest's female companions laughs, amused that an F-rank nobody is trying to act tough. Cheyenne, recovering from her shock, apologizes to Renya for dragging him into the confrontation. A knife-wielding woman in Zest's party stands, coldly stating that trash will always be trash, no matter how it acts. Her expression is chillingly calm, a stark contrast to Zest's barely contained, murderous rage. In a flash, she unleashes a volley of throwing knives, sending them hurtling across the tavern. In a brilliant flash of light, Renya's focus becomes absolute. A close-up shows his eye, narrowed and sharp with intense concentration. He moves with blinding speed, stopping Zest's attack as Zest gasps in shock. Renya's hand clamps firmly around Zest's wrist, his expression fierce. Zest's party members stare, their mouths agape with utter disbelief. Renya holds the two bottles, his face shadowed as he lets out a quiet sigh. Zest seethes with anger, muttering curses under his breath. A volley of throwing knives suddenly embeds itself in the table. Renya's eyes narrow, filled with a cold, calculating intensity. He states that he thought this was just a simple meet and greet. He concludes that the atmosphere is clearly not what he expected. Zest snarls, asking Renya whose fault he thinks that is. The stoic, armored adventurer Hars watches the confrontation unfold. The quiet sorcerer Az observes with a calm, neutral expression. Renya declares that if his party is the cause, they will simply leave. He says they'll do the job but don't need cooperation from those who see them as a hindrance. He tells the other parties to do as they please, as his group will act alone. Hars considers this, thinking it might be for the best. Az agrees, stating that forced cooperation would just be a nuisance. Zest clicks his tongue in frustration, his anger barely contained. Renya declares the matter settled and says they will be leaving now. As Renya and Cheyenne turn to go, Zest calls out to the rookie. He gives a venomous smirk, telling Renya to watch his back in the dungeon. Renya pauses but doesn't turn around, remaining silent. A sly smile touches his lips as he tells Zest the same applies to him. Zest is left fuming, clicking his tongue as the door slams shut. Outside, Cheyenne is flustered and begins to apologize profusely. Renya walks on, his back to her, his expression unreadable. Cheyenne looks on, speechless and worried about what just happened. She tries to apologize again, but Renya cuts her off with a sharp stop. He tells her the fault was his, so the matter is now finished. He reflects on how the atmosphere derailed. Cheyenne quietly agrees. Cheyenne still insists that she was the one who caused the problem. Renya snaps, threatening to crack her head open if she keeps whining. A tense silence passes between them after his outburst. Renya's tone softens as he says this is his first job as an adventurer. Cheyenne's eyes widen, tears welling up as she takes in his words. Her spirit renewed, she cheers and promises her full support. The next day, they journey through a vast landscape of mountains. A caravan of 4 covered wagons rumbles down a dirt road. The wooden wheels of the wagon clatter along the uneven path. Cheyenne sits at the front of one wagon, looking ahead. Inside, Lorna asks Renya with exasperation if he acted deliberately. Renya remains silent, a bead of sweat on his temple. He finally asks what she's talking about, feigning ignorance. Lorna argues that he could have handled things more smoothly. Renya explains it wasn't an atmosphere for cooperation anyway. Lorna asks what he means by calling his actions the best course. She says she has no desire to be forced to cooperate with incompetence. Renya concludes it's best to let those who can handle it do the work. He lays out his simple plan, don't overdo it and get paid. Lorna is aghast, realizing his strategy is to let others do the hard work. Renya's eyes glint as he holds up his hand with a sharp look. Lorna accuses him of being a parasite, but he calls it an efficient method. He notes that protecting Cheyenne would be difficult if they were unprepared. Lorna sighs in defeat, agreeing to his strategy for now. Cheyenne, listening in, thinks to herself that Renya looks like he's having fun. She pouts, saying she's always the one looking after him. Lorna gives Renya a knowing, slightly mischievous smile. She reminds him that Cheyenne's impulsive quest acceptance is his penalty. The wagon continues on its journey through the wooded path. They arrive at a barren, rocky landscape, the dungeon entrance nearby. Cheyenne asks if it's safe to camp so close. Lorna assures her it is. Lorna explains the dungeon is new, so powerful monsters won't appear yet. She adds that it's safer here than in the dangerous forest. They observe the crude steps leading down into the dark fissure. Renya asks why they only brought one tent. Lorna says one of them will stand watch. Cheyenne winks, asking if Renya dislikes sleeping near her or Lorna. Lorna blushes, saying his domestic skills are interesting in many ways. Renya, wearing an apron, begins to expertly chop vegetables for a meal. A large pot of stew bubbles over a carefully constructed campfire. A proper meal of stew, bread, and other dishes is laid out. Renya proudly presents the feast, declaring this is a real meal. Cheyenne and Lorna are amazed, saying it looks delicious and well prepared. The meal consists of stew, salad, nectar fruit, and wine. Renya scolds Cheyenne for trying to sneak a bite, calling her ill-mannered. Lorna notes that the other parties are only eating hard bread and dried meat. One of Har's men comments that their simple fare is normal for adventurers. The armored adventurers look over at Renya's feast with hungry eyes. Lorna says she's glad Renya's their companion, as Cheyenne happily eats. After the meal, Renya says he has something to tell them. His expression turns serious as he warns them to watch out for Zest's party. Lorna identifies Zest's camp in the distance. Renya suspects Zest might try to interfere with them in some way. His eye sharpens as he tells them to just keep the possibility in mind. Cheyenne and Lorna agree, understanding the gravity of his warning. Later that night, a half-moon hangs in the starry sky. Lorna stands guard outside their tent, her mace held ready. Inside, Renya feels relieved that Lorna is on watch as Cheyenne sleeps. He closes his eyes, thinking he needs to sleep before preparing breakfast. Suddenly, he feels a weight on top of him, wondering what it is. He realizes it's not an enemy, noting the softness of the presence. He discovers it's Cheyenne, who has crawled on top of him in her sleep. He observes that she's surprisingly well built for her size. He mentally slaps himself, realizing that's not the point right now. He tries to wake her, telling her he isn't Lorna. She just wriggles against him, murmuring in her sleep. Renya panics, terrified of what Lorna will think if she sees them. Cheyenne smiles blissfully, murmuring about how warm he is. The tent flap is thrown open, and Lorna asks if something is the matter. A voice from the tent's opening notes how comfortable Renya-san appears to be. Lorna's shadowed face looms as Cheyenne, inside, panics about their situation. Pinned beneath Cheyenne, a flustered Renya pleads for them to wait a moment. He looks up, confused, and calls out Lorna's name, questioning her presence. Lorna has now climbed inside, asking Renya what he is doing. She blushes softly, asking to be let in as it feels so nice. From within, Renya shouts, asking what happened to her guard duty. Lorna snuggles in, bidding him good night, saying Cheyenne looked too cozy. Renya struggles against them, wondering where they get their surprising strength. His face strained, he demands they get off and wake up. Suddenly, a powerful and unnatural drowsiness washes over him. He realizes with a jolt of alarm that this is an attack. His consciousness narrows to a single point and then vanishes completely. Outside the tent, a figure stands silhouetted against the starry night. Renya's eyes snap open, his instincts screaming that something is wrong. He hears Zest's party outside, plotting to kill him now that they can. Renya's eyes narrow, he instantly recognizes the venomous voice of Zest. Zest sorcerer explains that a sleep spell is the easiest way to deal with them. Zest mockingly asks if she's jealous of the other women with Renya. He laughs, declaring that they have no choice but to deal with him. The rival adventurer grips his weapon, ready to enact his cowardly plan. Zest's shadowed face grins, thinking it would be fun to set a trap. He leads his party away, chuckling that a death in the dungeon is no one's fault. Renya lets out a breath, realizing his reflex to killing intent saved them. He thinks he owes the sorcerer thanks, as that was a dangerously close call. Lorna stirs, her face flushing with embarrassment as she wakes up. The campsite is quiet in the aftermath of the betrayal. The first light of dawn breaks over the horizon. Hars and his men are awake, grimly realizing they have been betrayed. They see that Zest's party has completely cleared out their camp. Lorna bows an apology, but Hars is more concerned about Zest's arrogance. He muses that while the reward is huge, Zest's recklessness is a problem. Hars is surprised by Renya's calm, asking if he isn't worried about the money. Renya coolly replies that he would be grateful to get paid for a picnic. Az agrees, adding that he would even send a thank you note. Hars argues that Zest might fail, but Renya sees this as an opportunity. He explains that their failure would just weaken the monsters, which is good. Hars is stunned, asking if Renya has no intention of helping them at all. Renya states firmly that he has no obligation to clean up their mess. Az agrees, hoping they at least soften up the enemy before they die. Renya smiles, seeing that his and Az's thoughts are perfectly aligned. Hars is taken aback by their shared, cold-blooded pragmatism. His men watch as a new, unspoken alliance forms between the leaders. Renya tells Lorna they will wait for results, as there is no need to rush. He turns his attention to breakfast, telling Lorna to wake the sleeping Cheyenne. The two suns of this world rise in the pale morning sky. Renya presents a full breakfast, stunning Cheyenne and Lorna with the lavish spread. He stands by as Cheyenne looks on, clearly impressed by his preparations. One of Hars' men comments on how unusual their party is. Az reports that Hars' party has already gone into the dungeon after Zest. Renya asks if he's worried, but Az says it makes things easier. Hars' men eat their rations, glad the noisy party is gone. Renya suggests they all relax, since fate left them behind together. He offers to share his warm rice with the other party. They are stunned, asking if he really has enough for all 5 of them. Az, impressed, wonders where he could possibly be carrying all that food. Renya reveals that he possesses an item box and can carry plenty of supplies. He casually offers to prepare lunch for everyone as well, if they don't mind. The armored adventurers swallow hard, tempted by the incredible offer. Az steps forward, stopping them to propose a trade instead of a handout. Renya jokes about being poisoned, but Az insists on a fair exchange. Amused by his discipline, Renya asks what he has to offer. Az offers to teach him the beginner-level attack spell, Small Fireball. Renya considers the deal, recalling the high price of his last spell. Az asks for a delicious meal in return for the valuable knowledge. His party members note how hard their leader is working for them. Renya smiles and accepts, declaring that the deal is made. The empty bowls on the table signify the end of their meal. Renya and AZ stand apart from the camp to begin the magic lesson. AZ places his hand on Renya's forehead, magically transferring the spell. The knowledge of the new sorcery flows directly into Renya's mind. AZ provides the incantation, "By my power, fireball, strike." He explains Renya can now use it, provided he has enough mana. AZ then asks how many times Renya can cast his light spell. Renya admits that at first, he collapsed after just one attempt. He recalls his brutal 2-day training session alone in his room. He reveals he could cast it 16 times a minute for an entire hour. AZ is completely baffled by the seemingly impossible number. Renya confirms the total, calculating it to be 960 times. The sorcerer's eyes widen in utter disbelief at the number. He demands to know if Renya is even a swordsman. Kruar says he has no talent, but can become decent with practice. AZ accuses Renya of telling an outrageous lie. Renya insists it's true, asking if mana doesn't grow with use. AZ quietly states that it does not grow that quickly. He presses the point, saying that if Renya's claim is true, he explains that he himself would run out of power after 100 casts. This would mean Renya possesses nearly 10 times his own mana. AZ clutches his head, his understanding of magic completely shattered. He admits that even he is limited to activating only 2 spells at once. He challenges Renya, demanding he prove he can use such a high-level technique. Renya admits that he has tried something like it before. AZ is staggered to learn Renya can perform silent, incantation-less casting. The sorcerer bends over, roaring with laughter at the sheer absurdity. Renya is confused by his reaction, wondering if he said something odd. AZ advises him not to tell anyone else about his ridiculous talent. He warns that other mages would think he was a complete fool. Renya has a flashback, realizing this must be a gift from the goddess. He decides to use his new spell sparingly, thanking AZ for the advice. Renya gazes toward the dungeon, his resolve hardened by this new knowledge. Renya turns to his companion, a bead of sweat on his temple. The sorcerer AZ snaps that Renya's formal address is creepy, just AZ is fine. Renya concedes, hesitantly addressing him simply as AZ. He notes that the advance party has been inside the dungeon for a long time. They both gaze at the bleak landscape, wondering what could be taking so long. The dungeon's entrance gapes open, a deep, dark wound in the earth. From the abyss, a faint stirring signals that something has taken notice. In a dark lair, a silhouetted figure wonders if he'll have a good harvest today. A sharp, cruel smile flashes in the gloom, anticipating the coming events. Cheyenne and her party venture deeper, noting they have found another interesting specimen. The scientist Emile cries out in shock as Renya charges forward to attack. Emile's wind blade shatters against Renya's katana, stunning the scientist. Renya stands ready amidst the dissipating magic, challenging his foe's hesitation. In her divine realm, the servant Glire trembles, watching the battle unfold. Her face contorts with rage as she stammers, completely beside herself. She vibrates with fury, her twin tails standing on end in disbelief. A massive, silent scream of pure frustration rips through the heavens. Glire furiously demands to know why the creator god dispelled the magic. She points accusingly, reminding the god she personally retrieved the indestructible sword. The creator god casually dismisses her servant's rage, complaining that she's busy. Glire demands an answer, but the god just waves it off as nothing. The god explains that making a bamboo sword truly indestructible would be ridiculous. Glire retorts that it's a bamboo sword, not even a proper wooden one. The god muses that she had an idea to make it hard without feeling strange. She realized a normal katana being hard is perfectly fine, a brilliant solution. Glire fumes that the god planned all along to transfer the indestructible property. She complains that it wasn't a simple task, and the angels are all busy. The god laughs, deliberately calling Glire by the wrong name, enraging her further. She adds that Renya, being a professional, will surely handle the new sword well. The god is confident in Renya's abilities, but Glire remains deeply worried. Back in the dungeon, Emile eyes Renya's unique katana with scientific curiosity. He points, intrigued by the blade that destroyed his magic, and asks to see it. Renya flatly refuses, telling him to find the traveler he got it from. Emile sighs, deciding it would be much faster to simply take it by force. His reptilian eye narrows, he has made up his mind. Black, shadowy tendrils erupt violently from the back of his hand. The shadowy appendages whip through the air like living weapons. Renya watches the grotesque transformation, a bead of sweat on his brow. The tendrils shoot forward like spears, catching Renya by surprise. Emile strikes a pose, confident in his monstrous assault. Renya's eyes widen at the speed and ferocity of the attack. Gritting his teeth, he mutters that his opponent is a troublesome one. Emile chuckles, a low and menacing sound filling the cavern. He lunges, declaring that the feeling of being troublesome is mutual. Renya knows a simple thrust is useless if his foe can regenerate. His hand tightens on the hilt of his katana, preparing his next move. He unleashes a volley of small fireballs as a clever diversion. Emil is momentarily surprised by the chantless, multicast spell. He scoffs, calling the trick paltry and not even worth defending against. Renya's eyes narrow as he prepares to unleash his real attack. He closes the distance in an instant, his blade swinging as Emil gasps. The katana arcs through the air in a perfect, deadly slash. Emil's eye widens as he realizes the attack is aimed at his midsection. Renya spins with blinding speed, putting all his force into the strike. The blade connects, slicing cleanly through the scientist's body. Emil is bisected, his body exploding in a shower of black viscera. Renya's sharp, focused gaze follows through with the killing blow. The scientist's severed torso flies through the air as his legs collapse. Renya lands perfectly, flicking his blade clean as the body hits the floor. Droplets of black, sludge-like blood spatter across the stone. The two halves of the corpse begin to writhe and pull themselves together. His face shadowed, Renya raises his katana to strike the creature again. He brings the sword down in a powerful overhead slash to finish it. A spray of black blood spatters across Renya's grim face. The clone explodes in a final, violent burst of dark energy. Renya stands over the remains, catching his breath and wiping his face. In a flashback, Lorna and Cheyenne walk, discussing the city's many adventurers. Cheyenne excitedly reads the quest board, spotting missions for famous parties. Her fist clenches with a newfound determination to prove her worth. She resolves that she will join these skilled adventurers on a quest. The memory shifts to a nightmarish scene swarming with grotesque zombies. Cheyenne and Lorna are surrounded, their faces pale with absolute terror. Cheyenne's hands tremble uncontrollably as she grips the hilt of her sword. A fallen comrade had screamed that they would all end up like the undead. Her grip on her sword tightens with a mix of fear and resolve. She apologizes as a zombie disintegrates before her very eyes. Back in the present, Lorna warns Cheyenne that the poison is getting stronger. Cheyenne nods, agreeing to guard the front while Lorna performs the healing. Renya looks on, his expression grim and unreadable. Lorna watches Cheyenne with concern, a bead of sweat on her temple. The remains of Emil's clone are consumed in a cleansing inferno. Renya stands over the fire, his hand raised, ensuring the job is done. He believes that after being burned to ash, it surely cannot regenerate. He sees his own determined reflection in the polished steel of his katana. He realizes this sword can dispel magic without its edge ever dulling. A memory flashes of the blade effortlessly cutting through a magical attack. A quiet sound of understanding escapes Renya's lips. He muses that it doesn't matter now, he already lived a full life. Another memory shows Cheyenne and Lorna fighting desperately back to back. Cheyenne asks if this is the last one as she finishes off a zombie. As the final enemy falls, Cheyenne calls out to Renya in relief. Renya stands over a corpse, asking if it's the last, as Cheyenne inquires about the demon. He calmly reports that he somehow defeated the demon and finished the incineration. Lorna and Cheyenne can only stare at him, their expressions of pure shock. Cheyenne asks what he is, to have defeated a demon so nonchalantly. Renya deflects, asking about AZ's condition, which Lorna confirms is fine. AZ chants, gathering magical energy to his hands to finish their grim task. He unleashes a torrent of flame, commanding it to burn everything to ash. The fire spell roars to life, incinerating the remaining monster corpses. AZ reports his task is done, as Lorna playfully asks if Renya is a mid-level boss. An adventurer reports to the sorcerer AZ that their spellcasters are gravely wounded. Lorna urgently warns Renya to take an antidote against the poison filling the air. A thick, black tentacle erupts from the ground, violently striking Lorna. Renya shouts in shock as the force of the blow sends Lorna flying. Lying unconscious on the dungeon floor, Lorna lets out a pained groan. Renya watches in alarm as a second whip-like tentacle lashes out toward them. Cheyenne bravely intercepts the appendage, her armor sparking from the powerful impact. Renya cries out his companion's name as she takes the hit to protect the others. The tentacle whips past Cheyenne, striking AZ and sending him collapsing to the floor. A calm voice taunts them as Renya turns to face a horrifyingly familiar figure. Renya's face hardens as he recalls having already killed and burned this very man. The man's face reforms from smoldering remains, mockingly asking if it was his body. He steps forward from the sludge, explaining it was simply another form of himself. Adjusting his glasses, he suggests it may have only been a small part of him. Renya grits his teeth, annoyed that his enemy can even regenerate his clothes. The resurrected scientist, Emil, stands calmly before a stunned Renya. Renya asks Cheyenne if she's alright, amazed she blocked the lightning-fast attack. Emil seems impressed by Cheyenne's reflexes, noting that she is quite capable. Cheyenne retorts that her effort was meaningless, angered by his condescending tone. Her defiance is cut short as a tentacle flashes toward her with blinding speed. The appendage wraps tightly around her waist, catching her completely by surprise. She cries out as she is violently flipped upside down, suspended in the air. Renya shouts her name as she struggles helplessly against the constricting tentacle. Both Cheyenne and the unconscious Lorna are now bound and held captive. Emil declares that he has taken a liking to Renya, finding him fascinating. Renya responds to the perverse praise with a simple, annoyed grunt. Emil lists Renya's impressive traits, his skill, his magic, and his ruthless judgment. He wonders aloud about Renya's identity, speculating if he is a god-chosen hero. Renya dismisses the talk of heroes and demands his opponent identify himself. Emil offers a smug apology, admitting his introduction was delayed. Suddenly, the very walls of the dungeon chamber begin to crack and crumble. Renya watches in shock as the solid stone walls appear to dissolve into nothing. The dissolving matter flows into Emil, who stands unaffected by the chaos. Renya realizes with dawning horror that the wall is being absorbed into Emil. The truth becomes clear: the entire room is an extension of Emil's own body. Emil confirms this, explaining his body is made of specialized, shape-shifting cells. He formally introduces himself as Emil equals Raja, a demon scientist who modified his body. As a bioengineer, he seeks superior specimens, his gaze falling upon Lorna. He declares Lorna will be his, and offers to grant Renya a new body as well. The offer of a magnificent new body is delivered with chilling, sinister intent. Renya shows his utter disgust for the proposition by spitting on the ground. He lunges forward in a burst of speed, his katana a silver blur. Emil's eyes widen slightly as he narrowly dodges the lightning-fast sword strike. Renya's powerful swing cuts through the empty air where Emil just stood. His face is a mask of pure focus as he completes the powerful attack. Though the attack misses, the sheer force of the swing is palpable. Emil leaps backward, creating distance from the incredibly dangerous swordsman. Renya clicks his tongue in annoyance, bluntly refusing the scientist's twisted offer. Emil adjusts his glasses, concluding that close-quarters combat with Renya is too risky. He muses that he had planned to use the women as leverage, but changes his mind. He casually drops his captives, deciding to observe Renya's abilities for a while longer. Atop a mass of writhing tentacles, Emil announces that the preparations are complete. Renya glares at his foe, sweat on his brow, preparing for the next phase. With a chilling smile, Emil declares that it is time to restart their battle. He unleashes a volley of massive, spear-like tentacles that shoot towards Renya. Renya moves with incredible speed, dodging and weaving between the chaotic appendages. He quickly analyzes the attack, identifying 3 primary tentacles leading the assault. AZ, watching from the ground, is shocked to see a ball of light suddenly vanish. Renya uses the light as a feint, ducking under a tentacle in the confusion. AZ realizes with astonishment that the light was a brilliant diversionary tactic. Cheyenne, also watching intently, lets out a gasp as she understands the feint. Having successfully evaded the attack, Renya lands gracefully on the dungeon floor. He spits in annoyance, his clever tactic having only bought him a brief moment. Emil smiles, complimenting Renya on his impressive and unexpected move. Renya clenches his fist, knowing he must abandon feints and attack directly. He realizes that simply reacting to the sound of the attacks is too dangerous. He summons 2 orbs of light, illuminating the dark and crumbling battlefield. His eyes narrow with intense focus, a bead of sweat on his brow. Emil calmly explains that his tentacles are troublesome because they regenerate when cut. Renya knows that taking a direct hit from them would be unbelievably devastating. He glances at his fallen comrades, realizing he must administer first aid soon. AZ's party is also down, and the chamber is still filled with a poisonous miasma. A thin, predatory smile crosses Renya's face as the situation shifts once more. He unleashes a blinding, wide-area flash of light, a powerful magical burst. Emil is slightly surprised by the incantationless, parallel spell activation. Renya steals his resolve, knowing he must hold out until he can defeat his foe. Emil correctly deduces that Renya seems limited to only beginner-level magic. Renya smirks, admitting to himself that his opponent has seen right through him. Emil launches another massive attack, asking if Renya is going to disappoint him. Renya's movements become even sharper as he dodges through the tentacle swarm. He leaps high into the air, katana raised for a powerful downward slash. He believes this single, decisive blow will finally end the protracted fight. Emil calmly chants, "Wind Blade," unleashing an invisible magical counterattack. Renya is shocked by the sudden magic, urging himself to regain his composure. He twists his body in midair, bringing his katana around to block the spell. A bright flash erupts as he successfully parries the invisible wind blade. The force of the blow sends him skidding across the floor as he lands. His expression is one of strained focus, recognizing the grave danger he is in. Emil lets out a small, amused chuckle at Renya's impressive resilience. He taunts Renya, revealing that incantationless casting isn't his exclusive skill. Renya realizes a direct charge is futile and resolves to grind his enemy down. The scene abruptly shifts to a serene, otherworldly space bathed in light. The divine servant Glire worriedly asks her master if she is all right. The creator god, Ariel, looks up from her screen with a simple, Glire insists the demon is a tough opponent and Ariel seems too invested. Ariel confidently declares it will be fine, as she bestowed her grace on Renya. Glire counters that even with that grace, the demon is not yet fighting seriously. Ariel muses on Renya's incredible body and spirit, forged in a past life. Glire is stunned to learn the grace isn't even active yet. Ariel confirms Renya's power is mostly his own, with only a slight divine boost. The goddess chides her servant, Glire, for not properly checking a human's abilities. Renya unleashes a powerful sword strike, a blur of dark energy and motion. A chilling, predatory grin spreads across Renya's shadowed face. A flashback reveals his past as the 14th head of the Kiryu sword style. By 15, he was a killer for the underworld, fighting across a chaotic continent. He later survived the World War by building a mountain of corpses to stand on. The flashback is punctuated by the image of his blade cutting through the air. With a single sword, his demon-like strength was known to all he faced. An extreme close-up shows the terrifying intensity burning in his eyes. He became known by a single name from friend and foe alike, the Sword Demon. The goddess explains his youth was a crucible of brutal, unending battles. Unimpressed by her champion's violent past, Glire questions the goddess's plan to save the world. Back in the dungeon, Renya asks if the battle is already over. The demon scientist, Emil, clutches his head in utter disbelief and shock. Renya offers only a quiet, almost bored, in response. He looks on with mild annoyance, asking what his opponent wants. Emil's shock transforms into a wide, manic grin of pure excitement. Renya is taken aback by this sudden, unsettling shift in demeanor. Emil is ecstatic, demanding Renya show him everything he is capable of. His mouth opens in a silent scream, inviting the battle to continue. Renya looks on with disgust, identifying his foe as a mad scientist. His heart thumps as he realizes he and the scientist may be the same. Emil summons a mass of shadowy tentacles, eager to see what Renya will do next. Standing over his enemy's smoldering remains, Renya tells him to relax. His katana held ready, he declares his intention to end this now. Emil understands that Renya is finally revealing his true, full power. The demon's hand clenches into a fist as he decides to respond in kind. His hand begins to transform, veins bulging with dark power. He will face Renya with all the strength he has remaining. Emil becomes a monstrous being of tentacles and gaping maws, towering over Renya. The shadowy creature taunts him, challenging him to face its overwhelming numbers. Renya looks on grimly, wondering if there are still more to come. Emil's face is a mask of pure, joyous battlelust as he screams. He taunts Renya, asking how he could possibly deal with such an attack. Renya leaps into the fray, dodging between the lashing appendages with impossible grace. Emil sneers, saying he is already bored of this predictable attack pattern. Renya lands on a tentacle, his blood-splattered katana poised for a downward slash. His face is a mask of pure focus as he brings the blade down. The air cracks with the sound of his powerful, cleaving strike. Emil smirks, believing Renya is full of openings and only capable of defense. Surrounded, Renya crouches low and whispers the incantation for light. A blinding flash of light erupts, engulfing the cavern in brilliance. A close-up shows Renya's mouth as he completes the simple spell. Emil's eyes widen in surprise, momentarily stunned by the flash. Renya unleashes his true power, parallel spell activation, 16. Emil is struck from behind by an unseen force, letting out a choked gasp. Blinded, he frantically wonders where his opponent has vanished to. Renya is already behind him, calmly asking if he saw the feint properly. A close-up on Renya's eye reveals his cold, calculating strategy. Emil screams in panic, realizing Renya is behind him and has used wind magic. Renya's voice rings out, declaring that his opponent was too slow. His hands grip the hilt of his katana, ready for the final blow. Emil's body is shredded by a storm of invisible, intersecting wind blades. Renya watches intently as his devastating, silent attack finds its mark. The demon scientist chokes, blood erupting from his mouth as his body is torn apart. Severed pieces of tentacles are sent flying amidst a spray of black blood. Renya looks on, his eyes shadowed, witnessing the result of his overwhelming power. Emil's mangled body desperately tries to regenerate, new appendages sprouting from his wounds. Renya thrusts his hand forward, his face a mask of fury, preparing another spell. He unleashes a second, even larger assault, 24 parallel fireballs. Emil's face is a mask of pure horror as the inferno rushes towards him. Renya stands amidst the flames, determined to burn away every last cell. He turns his head, watching intently as the fire purifies the battlefield. The charred, broken form of Emil lies gasping on the cavern floor. The dying scientist realizes Renya had planned this from the start. Renya confirms the strategy, a single, decisive blow was his only goal. Emil's head lolls to the side as he accepts his defeat. He admits he was a fool to be beaten by a beginner sorcerer. Renya warns him not to be careless, promising one more finishing blow. He vows to carve him up until nothing remains but ash. Emil's face twists not in fear, but in a strange, trembling excitement. His voice is filled with a bizarre, unsettling emotion as he speaks. Renya looks down, utterly confused by his opponent's strange reaction. He raises his katana high above his head, preparing the final execution. He pauses mid-swing, his face a mask of pure bafflement. Huh? Emil confesses his adoration for Renya's character and his merciless eyes. Renya shudders, completely repulsed by the demon's confession. His hand tightens on the hilt of his sword, his patience gone. He abandons the execution, instead stabbing his sword through Emil's shoulder. Emil screams in pain and surprise, begging Renya to wait. His eyes shadowed in rage, Renya ignores his opponent's desperate pleas. He warns Emil not to say another creepy thing, or his end will be swift. Pinned and bleeding, Emil gasps out a new proposal, a deal. Renya pauses, surprised by the offer of a negotiation. Emil looks up at him from the ground, his expression serious. He admits he cannot fight anymore, and that his goal is now impossible. He gestures to the fallen adventurers, reminding Renya of their plight. He asks how Renya plans to get his poison friends back to the city. Renya's eye narrows as he silently acknowledges the truth in Emil's words. Emil reveals his trump card, he has the means to cure them. He even offers to hand over the dungeon core, now useless to him. Renya considers the offer, admitting that it's not a bad deal. But his face is a mask of suspicion, he cannot trust the demon. Emil provides a chilling incentive, a reanimated zombie of a fallen adventurer. Renya dismisses the threat, stating that such concerns are beneath him. Emil's interest is now solely focused on Renya, his new obsession. He notes that while Renya is immune, his friends are still vulnerable. He taunts Renya, suggesting a truly ruthless man would abandon them. Emil is delighted by this perceived cruelty, saying it's what he loves. He promises they will meet again, setting the stage for a future conflict. Emil taunted Renya, offering the girl's lives in exchange for his body. Renya confronted the demon, who noted how invested he had become. Emil chuckled, reminding Renya that he always considered him a special case. Renya considered that being killed by this creature might be an acceptable fate. He was snapped from his thoughts by the image of an unconscious Cheyenne. Lorna was also down, as Emil coolly asked Renya what he would do. The demon scientist looked on, awaiting the hero's difficult choice. A memory of Cheyenne's earnest request to join their party flashed in Renya's mind. With a soft clatter, Renya lowered his sword, having made his decision. Emil stated that in that case, he had just one more condition. His voice echoed as he commanded Renya to carry his friends outside. The jarring sound of a wagon in motion filled the air. Cheyenne slept soundly, murmuring softly in the back of the moving carriage. Her eyes fluttered open as she slowly regained consciousness from the battle. She awoke disoriented, wondering where she was under the canvas roof. Her gaze fell upon Renya's back as he sat at the wagon's opening. She sat up with a start, calling out his name in surprise. A sharp pain shot through her shoulder, reminding her of the demon. Renya looked over his shoulder, calmly asking if she was finally awake. He held up a crystal shard, explaining he'd destroyed the dungeon core. Cheyenne was shocked, realizing they would now receive an additional reward. As the wagons rumbled on, Renya explained they were returning to Klefkul. He told Cheyenne that her wounds weren't deep, but she should rest more. A brief, violent flash of clashing steel from the fight filled her mind. Cheyenne looked down meekly, apologizing for having been a burden. Lying down, she saw Lorna and felt she had failed her companions again. Renya's hand clenched into a fist, his expression hardening with resolve. Cheyenne watched his back, wondering if she had been saved by him yet again. The wagon continued its journey up the long road leading to the city. Soon, the familiar sight of Klefkul's buildings came into view. At the inn, Hars asked Renya to explain what happened in the dungeon. Renya gave a simplified report of the demon's goals and his retreat. He assured them he had submitted the core and secured the bonus pay. Renya calculated their massive earnings, which totaled 100 gold coins. Hars, however, looked troubled, saying that wasn't what he meant to ask. Renya met his gaze with a serious, unreadable expression. Hars couldn't fathom how an F-rank fought a demon and wondered who Renya was. The scene paused on the back of a wagon, a moment of quiet travel. In a flashback, Emil told Renya his friends would soon awaken. Renya held the crystal, identifying it as a common magic stone. Emil confirmed it, explaining he needed a substitute for his own core. He admitted it was a fake, undetectable by human science. Renya was wary. Emil offered Renya a chance to join him, an offer Renya flatly rejected. Promising they would meet again, the demon scientist finally departed. Renya decided it was best to keep his deal with Emil a secret. Hars stared intently at Renya, his silence filled with questions. He finally asked if Renya was certain about splitting the reward evenly. Hars insisted his party had contributed almost nothing to the victory. Renya countered that without their help, they all would have surely died. Hars' men were grateful, but he insisted the thanks belonged to Renya. Renya waved it off, stating that they urgently needed the money anyway. Hars looked on, his face a mixture of respect and concern. He noted that their party would not be disbanding, a fact Renya confirmed. With a heavy heart, Hars announced his own party was retiring. His men agreed, deciding to return to their former lives as farmers. Renya looked at them with understanding, agreeing it was for the best. Cheyenne listened to their exchange with a quiet, worried expression. Hars clenched his fist on the table, thanking Renya for everything. The inn's maid asked Hars what his plans were now. He politely declined her offer of work, explaining he had another invitation. He would be an instructor at the Adventurer Academy for Noble's children. Renya sipped his drink, making a sly comment about the Noble students. Lorna pretended not to hear, looking away with a nervous sweat drop. Cheyenne, too, looked uncomfortable, avoiding everyone's gaze. Renya set his mug down, confirming he had no interest in joining. Hars offered his aid, promising to help Renya however he could. Renya gave a slight smile, saying he was grateful for the offer. They shook hands, sealing a new alliance born from the dungeon's fires. With a final wave, Hars and his men departed, their paths diverging. The scene faded, marking the end of their joint venture. Renya noted that even with the reward, they couldn't afford a house yet. Lorna, pressing a hand to her head, weakly agreed with him. Renya apologized, admitting it was a bad situation for her to be in. Exhausted, Lorna lamented how draining the healing magic had been. Renya suspected Emil had tampered with the poison to downplay its effects. He glanced at Cheyenne, who seemed energetic, her wounds apparently minor. Suddenly, Cheyenne slammed her hands on the table, shouting Renya's name. She leaned forward, blushing and stammering, struggling to speak. Her hands trembled as she tried to form the words for her request. With a burst of courage, she finally asked if he would go out with her. Renya and Lorna were left completely speechless by her sudden confession. The scene changed to a rocky wasteland, her true meaning becoming clear. At the hermit's graveyard, Renya complained about this special training. Cheyenne became flustered, insisting she hadn't meant anything romantic. Lorna watched from the side, giggling at Cheyenne's awkwardness. Cheyenne's face flushed a deeper red as she became even more embarrassed. She waved her hands frantically, trying to explain herself to Renya. She wasn't asking for a date, she clarified, but for a sparring match. She felt she wasn't qualified to stand beside him in a fight. More than that, she felt like she was just a burden to the party. A flashback showed her helplessness while Renya fought in the dungeon. She explained that he was always fighting ahead, leaving her behind. Renya admitted he hadn't realized she felt so strongly about it. Cheyenne declared with fiery resolve that she wanted to become stronger. Renya listened to her plea, his expression serious and understanding. He mused that her wanting to train was actually a good outcome. He agreed that since they were a party, it was good for both to improve. He lowered his sword, ready to test the resolve behind her words. With a challenging smirk, he told her to try and land a single blow. If she could succeed, he promised to help with her special training. In the desolate hermit's graveyard, Renya calmly kneels, challenging Cheyenne to begin their spar. With a determined shout, Cheyenne's face fills the frame, her spirit unbroken. Their practice swords finally meet with a sharp clang of protesting steel. Meanwhile, in the city, Lorna is surprised by a man offering a large cucumber. She happily browses a stall, admiring the shopkeeper's collection of fine trinkets. Carrying a bag of groceries, Lorna hums a cheerful tune as she walks. Back in the wasteland, Renya's voice echoes, calling Cheyenne's attack far too slow. He continues his harsh critique, noting her swings are too wide and predictable. He instructs her to make her slashes more compact and much, much faster. Renya explains that she must learn to guide her opponent's reactions with feints. He tells her to stop the enemy's momentum before committing to her own attack. Cheyenne pants in frustration, realizing she hasn't managed to land a single blow. Her horror grows as she understands he hasn't even bothered to block her. Renya stands calmly, having effortlessly seen through and dodged her every move. Cheyenne wonders in awe what kind of life he must have lived to be so strong. The unspoken question hangs in the air, a testament to his impossible skill. He reminds her that an attack that doesn't connect is completely meaningless. Internally, however, Renya admits that her strikes carry surprising weight. A thin, predatory smirk appears on his face, signaling a change in the duel. He notes that she must be tired of attacking without any real response. Renya announces it's his turn to strike, warning her to be careful. Her fighting spirit reignites as she roars that it's just what she wanted. Before he can move, the ground behind Cheyenne erupts in a shower of rock. Renya looks on, his calm expression finally breaking into one of genuine surprise. Cheyenne whips around, her face a mask of shock at the sudden interruption. A massive, cloven hoof slams into the dirt, emerging from the new crater. A hulking, monstrous figure looms over them, its presence dominating the field. Cheyenne cries out that it's an orc, questioning what it's doing here. She looks into its cunning eyes, realizing this is no ordinary monster. She asks if it's strong, admitting she has never seen one so large. Renya coolly assesses the beast, deciding it makes for a perfect training partner. To Cheyenne's horror, he casually walks to a nearby rock and sits down. He feigns indecision, wondering aloud what he should possibly do now. The orc lets out a deafening roar, its fanged maw wide open. Cheyenne desperately asks Renya for a plan, her voice laced with panic. He smiles, pointing out the orc is an excellent opportunity for combat experience. She protests that she only has a practice sword, which is useless against it. Gritting her teeth, Cheyenne knows deep down that she cannot back down now. She declares she won't make excuses, her resolve hardening into a fierce glare. Vowing to get closer to Renya's level, her face becomes a mask of determination. With a powerful battle cry, she charges the monster, meeting it head-on. Her expression is focused as she swings her sword with all her might. The blade strikes the orc's thick hide, but the blow is utterly ineffective. The beast barely flinches, its expression one of pure, brutish annoyance. A tiny glint on its cheek is the only sign her attack even connected. Cheyenne realizes with dismay that her blunted practice sword can't hurt it. Renya watches intently, her form is rough, but he can see her tactical mind working. She continues her assault, striking the orc's back to no effect. She curses in frustration, knowing her direct attacks are completely useless. The blade cannot penetrate the creature's thick layers of fat and muscle. She worries that her sword will break long before she can do any real damage. Frantically, she tries to formulate a new strategy to defeat the hulking beast. Renya's earlier lesson echoes in her mind, guide the opponent's movements. She decides on a new tactic, preparing to lure the orc into a trap. She ducks low, striking at the orc's leg to change its attack pattern. The orc roars in frustration, its attention now fully focused on her. She continues her low attacks, forcing it to switch to downward swings. A flicker of approval crosses Renya's face as he sees her plan unfold. He notes with satisfaction that she's gathering data and adapting her strategy. A small diagram shows how her size forces the orc into predictable vertical chops. The frustrated orc rears back, preparing a massive overhead swing from a distance. As it brings its axe down, its head lowers, creating a critical opening. Renya sees the opportunity and gives a single, sharp command, blind it. Kicking off the rocky ground, Cheyenne launches herself upward at the beast's face. She thrusts her sword forward, aiming directly for the orc's vulnerable eye. The blade finds its mark, plunging deep into the monster's eye socket. Using the beast's flailing arm as a springboard, she leaps high into the air. She brings her sword down with all her strength onto the orc's skull. The massive creature crashes to the ground, defeated, as Cheyenne lands beside it. Renya watches the aftermath, a single bead of sweat on his brow. Cheyenne lets out a huge gasp of air, her body trembling with adrenaline. She collapses to the ground, utterly exhausted but victorious over the beast. The orc's axe swings in a final, dying blow, nearly striking her. Renya blocks it, chiding her for not delivering a proper finishing blow. Cheyenne admits it was a tough fight and says she deserves a little praise. In chibi form, Renya and Cheyenne agree it was a barely passing grade. He asks if she can stand, offering her a hand to help her up. Cheyenne looks at his hand, a mischievous glint appearing in her eyes. Renya asks what's wrong, noticing her sudden hesitation and slight blush. She apologizes sheepishly as her hand flashes out with surprising speed. Renya's eyes widen in surprise as he realizes what she is doing. With a triumphant cry, she snatches his practice sword from his grasp. She exclaims that she has finally managed to take something from him. With a wide, cheeky grin, she declares that she has scored 1 point. Renya scratches his head, exasperated but secretly amused by her victory. He agrees to her terms, promising to train her as she wishes. He quietly asks if she is tired from the grueling battle. The scene shifts back to the city, showing the familiar European-style rooftops. Lorna greets them as Renya returns, carrying the exhausted Cheyenne on his back. Lorna teases them, remarking that their training must have been very intense. She playfully asks Cheyenne how it feels to be carried on Renya's back. Lorna mentions that the orc's appearance in the graveyard was quite a surprise. She suggests they report the orc, cash in its magic stone, and go house hunting. Lorna adds that she has some good information she gathered in town today. She excitedly tells them she may have already found the perfect house for them. She leads them to the very edge of the city's commercial district. They arrive before a grand, 2-story mansion with an ornate iron gate. Cheyenne gasps in awe, while Renya looks on with a suspicious expression. Lorna explains she found it by chance, but Renya senses there's a catch. Renya asks Cheyenne if she thinks Lorna would have been alright on her own. Cheyenne's face twists into a mask of pure annoyance, her displeasure clear. She argues that the house is meant to be a base for their whole party. Renya is confused by her strong reaction, while she turns away with a huff. A door creaks open, revealing a brightly lit and surprisingly grand interior. The party stands in the spacious foyer of a large, 2-story mansion. Lorna stands by a window, calmly taking in the view from their new home. Cheyenne watches thoughtfully as Renya walks ahead to inspect the property. They enter the rustic kitchen, complete with a large, brick-and-stone oven. Renya's fist clenches in silent victory upon discovering a modern-style bathtub. Cheyenne and Lorna are impressed by the size of one of the many bedrooms. With his hands on his hips, Renya surveys a room perfect for a workshop. The three gather in the main hall, considering the massive space. The view up the grand staircase hints at the many comfortable rooms above. Lorna explains a wealthy merchant once lived here, making it spacious for 3. Renya agrees that a workshop and bath are a great help for his new life. He calculates their funds, realizing the 80 gold price will require a loan. Unfamiliar with local prices, Renya asks Lorna if the house seems too cheap. Lorna covers a sly giggle, admitting the property is an excellent bargain. With a knowing smile, Lorna turns to an oblivious Cheyenne to get her opinion. Cheyenne is ecstatic, declaring that with so many rooms, they can all live together. Standing proudly on the front steps, Renya announces that their decision is made. The dark, round shape of a keyhole hints at a hidden secret. Cheyenne finds her companion setting up a tent in the garden, utterly baffled. Renya asks Lorna why she didn't tell Cheyenne about the house's little problem. A question mark hangs over Cheyenne's head, she is completely lost. Renya bluntly informs her that the mansion is rumored to be haunted. Cheyenne stammers the word ghosts in disbelief as terror dawns on her face. He explains the haunting is why it's cheap and they need to investigate. Her mind snaps, her face contorting in fear as she repeats, impossible. She grabs Renya, trying to flee while shouting that she can't handle ghosts. In tears, she begs to go home, questioning why they'd stay here. Renya glares at Lorna, gesturing to the hysterical Cheyenne clinging to him. Lorna feigns innocence, wondering aloud if she forgot to mention the ghosts. He tries to reason with Cheyenne, asking why she is so afraid of ghosts. He points out that unlike monsters, ghosts can't exactly be cut down. Lorna begins to tell the grim tale of the mansion's previous owner. He was a wealthy merchant with a beautiful wife, a child, and many servants. The merchant was known for being generous and taking good care of his staff. His business thrived, and it seemed his happy life would continue forever. But in the shadows of the city, a series of mysterious disappearances began. The victims were all young women, many of them maids from the mansion. One day, a man waited at a statue for his girlfriend, one of the maids. Their meeting was for 7 o'clock, but she never arrived. Worried, he decided to sneak to the mansion to check on her. He crept silently through the grounds and peered into a brightly lit window. Inside, he witnessed a horrific scene of the merchant over a dismembered body. Cheyenne lets out a blood-curdling scream at the gruesome details of the story. Lorna continues, describing the killer and his massive, blood-soaked shears. After his execution, the ghosts of the murdered women began to haunt the house. A terrified Cheyenne lets out a small yelp, her imagination running wild. She suddenly drops to her knees, crying that she felt a presence behind her. Renya dismisses it as her imagination, but his expression suddenly hardens. He, too, has felt a distinct presence approaching them in the garden. Lorna's playful demeanor vanishes, her senses confirming the ghostly arrival. A thick fog rolls across the lawn, and spectral figures begin to materialize. The ghostly silhouettes drift towards them, their faint whispers filling the air. Cheyenne clings to Renya for dear life, stammering that the rumors are true. Lorna closes her eyes, clasping her hands in prayer to assess the spirits. She notes that for ghosts, they don't seem to possess much spiritual energy. Cheyenne wails, asking how they can be so calm while she's losing her mind. Renya draws his katana, wondering aloud if a ghost can even be cut. A confident smirk crosses his face as he decides to test his theory. His eyes narrow with intense focus as he prepares to strike the apparition. He unleashes a swift, powerful slash that passes directly through the ghost. The spectral form dissipates into a wisp of smoke as the blade connects. Renya is momentarily surprised that his physical attack actually worked. He remarks that he cut it with no problem, shocking a wide-eyed Lorna. He muses that the feeling was like cutting magic, crediting his special blade. He decides to cut down all the spirits to ensure a peaceful night's sleep. He tells Lorna to clean the house while he deals with the garden ghosts. Cheyenne latches onto him with a powerful grip, refusing to be left behind. Renya tells her to let go, explaining that he can't fight with her clinging on. She pleads that her legs have gone numb with fear, begging him not to leave her. A flustered Renya calls out to Lorna for help with the situation. He grits his teeth in exasperation, realizing he has no other choice. Hoisting the terrified Cheyenne onto his back, Renya marches into the mansion. Lorna watches them go with a sly giggle, telling them to take their time. Inside the house, Renya prepares to strike another ghost with Cheyenne on his back. His blade flashes, and another spectral figure vanishes into nothingness. He continues his one-man exorcism, his terrified passenger holding on tight. He notes that while his sword works, there's no satisfying feeling of impact. Cheyenne praises his strength, saying she's glad to have him in their party. The sound effects indicate the last of the ghosts have been vanquished. Renya stands with his sword, declaring that the matter is finally settled. Still on his back, Cheyenne hesitantly calls out his name. She asks if, now that they have a home, their journey together is over. The question of the party disbanding hangs in the air of the empty hall. Renya realizes with a start that acquiring a home was their original goal. He explains that it's impossible for now, he can only afford the down payment. He states that he must continue adventuring until the entire loan is paid off. Cheyenne listens intently, her worried expression slowly beginning to soften. Overjoyed, her face breaks into a wide, relieved grin. Renya tells her it's time to get down and walk on her own 2 feet. Her mood completely changed, she playfully gives his shoulders a small squeeze. A sudden, sharp noise from down the hall startles them both. Renya asks if she heard it, and she confirms it wasn't a ghost. Cheyenne's bravery vanishes instantly, and she begins trembling all over again. Renya sighs, realizing the sound came from the first-floor workshop. He carries her down the darkened hallway towards the mysterious noise. They stop before a closed door, preparing to face a new, unknown presence. Within the newly acquired mansion, a dusty storeroom held a secret. Renya peered cautiously into the darkness, his senses on high alert. On the floor lay a small, still figure in a maid's uniform. Cheyenne knelt, noticing the girl had distinctly pointed ears. Renya voiced their shared thought, could this girl be an elf? Outside, the grand mansion stood silently under a purple, twilight sky. They carried the unconscious girl into the main hall for safety. As they watched, the mysterious girl began to stir with a soft moan. Cheyenne and Renya looked down, wondering about the pointed-eared child. Cheyenne asked again if she could possibly be an elf. A new chapter began, titled The Guardian of the House. Renya turned to Cheyenne, asking what had just happened. Lorna arrived, letting out a gasp of surprise at the scene. She was completely taken aback by the unexpected discovery. Cheyenne began to explain, confirming what Lorna was seeing. They observed the girl, her clothes undisturbed, ruling out a struggle. Lorna sighed that she had a bad feeling, much to Renya's annoyance. She remarked on the strangeness of finding an elf girl here. The girl groaned softly, still on the verge of waking. Cheyenne told Lorna she'd never heard rumors of elves in the city. The girl shifted slightly, her small body still limp. Lorna pieced it all together, the elf-like maid, the shadow in the ruin. She voiced her theory, perhaps the girl was a legendary Silky. Renya's internal system helpfully defined a Silky as a household spirit. A divine message then warned him not to harm the weak little girl. Annoyed, Renya wondered if the goddess was watching him. Cheyenne recalled stories of Silkies being benevolent but mischievous spirits. Renya began to understand the situation, a dark smile forming. Cheyenne realized this girl was the ghost, the house wasn't haunted after all. Renya concluded she was this world's version of a household spirit. He knelt beside her, gently asking if she was alright. The girl's eyes fluttered open, her expression dazed and confused. The 3 adventurers watched intently as she finally regained consciousness. They gathered around the small girl as she slowly sat up. Her eyes shot open wide with sudden, dawning panic. She flinched away from Renya's hand, recoiling in fear. "Get out!" she screamed, her voice filled with desperate rage. Renya calmly tried to reassure her that they meant no harm. The girl huddled defensively, still wary of the intruders. He introduced himself as an adventurer who wished to live there. She defiantly claimed only her master could live in her home. Renya explained that the house's original owner was long dead. The girl's face filled with horror at the devastating news. The reality of her master's death began to sink in. She stared blankly, lost in confusion and newfound grief. Lorna realized the girl was born after her master had already gone. The girl understood she was born into an already empty home. Cheyenne explained a Silky's purpose is to serve its master. Without a master, she was left only with an instinct to guard the house. She tearfully demanded they leave the home that gave her life. Renya observed her with a calm, almost detached expression. The girl trembled, overwhelmed by grief and helplessness. She nervously wrung the fabric of her apron in her small hands. Renya noted she was weak and couldn't survive without a master. She admitted it was impossible, having used up all her magic. His companions wondered what he meant by just now. Renya understood she had created the ghostly illusions they had seen. He concluded that her desperate act had left her powerless. He then offered a simple solution: he would be her new master. The girl was stunned, stammering at the thought of him as her master. Renya promised to make it a good home if she would accept him. He assured her he wouldn't treat her badly, wanting a better home himself. Lorna and Cheyenne noted his surprisingly gentle tone, much to his chagrin. He asked if his offer was unacceptable. The girl felt she had failed and had no strength left to resist. She lamented that the house's own ambient magic was nearly gone. With a trembling voice, she asked if he would truly make it a good home. Renya confirmed it without hesitation, saying of course he would. Cheyenne smiled warmly, adding that it was a promise. A blush crept across the girl's face as she agreed. She sealed the pact with a handshake, accepting her new master. A few days later, the grand mansion looked completely renewed. Inside, the once dusty chandeliers sparkled brilliantly. The grand staircase and windows gleamed in the sunlight. Cheyenne happily declared it no longer looked like a haunted house. She noted, however, that they still needed to replace the furniture. Renya apologized to Lorna for the expense, but she waved it off. Lorna teased that it was part of her dowry and she'd get it back. Renya was amazed the Silky had cleaned the entire mansion so fast. A cheerful voice answered that it was only natural. The Silky appeared with tea, energized by her new master's mana. She proudly explained that she protects the house by borrowing his power. She had been surviving on the garden's tainted magic and was fading. Cheyenne and Lorna shuddered, realizing the source of that magic. The girl smiled, confirming it was the resentment of the dead. Cheyenne was completely horrified by her cheerful and morbid admission. Lorna realized the ghost was real, just not what they thought. Renya let out a sigh of relief, glad the matter was settled. The Silky peeked at him, indicating she wasn't quite finished. She told her master that one important task remained. She clenched her fists, declaring that she wanted a name. Renya realized she was right, she couldn't just be Silky. He fumbled, suggesting generic pet names, to the girl's dismay. Lorna scolded him for his terrible naming sense. Suddenly, Cheyenne had a flash of brilliant inspiration. She leaned in close to whisper her idea to Renya. He listened intently and gave a nod of approval. He gently patted the girl's head, naming her Frau equals word. He told her he looked forward to having her around from now on. And so, their troubles settled, they had finally secured their new home. AZ arrives at Renya's new home, looking up at the impressive two-story mansion. Inside, AZ sits on a plush sofa, speaking with Renya in the living room. AZ remarks on the fine house, and Renya agrees as Frau curiously peeks from behind AZ. With a polite bow, Frau tells their guest to please make himself comfortable. As the maid happily skips off, AZ muses that the house even came with a Silky. Renya smirks, lamenting that he's now in debt and must continue his dangerous work. AZ sips his tea with a knowing smile, commenting that Renya hasn't changed. Getting down to business, AZ explains that he has come to ask for a favor. He reminds Renya of the teaching position he took at the Adventurer Training Academy. A problem, he explains, has occurred in one of the classes at the school. The scene shifts to a wide, empty shot of the Academy's grand training arena. AZ explains an instructor was defeated by a student, causing a class-wide boycott. Renya asks his guest if this is a particularly rare occurrence. AZ considers this, admitting that while it is rare, it's not completely unheard of. He explains that most instructors are second-rate adventurers who have left the front lines. In contrast, some of the noble students have been professionally trained since childhood. Renya correctly surmises they won't learn from those they deem weaker than themselves. With a sly grin, Renya guesses AZ wants him to go discipline the arrogant students. AZ lets out a weary sigh, confirming that is more or less his request. Renya notes that this problem doesn't seem to directly involve AZ. AZ hesitantly admits it's not entirely unrelated, as other staff are being disrespected. He recalls his own weakness as a sorcerer in one-on-one combat without support. Renya realizes AZ sought him out as a swordsman who can use incantationless magic. Sensing there's more to it, Renya asks if the defeated instructor was a swordsman. AZ confirms it was a skilled D-rank female adventurer who should not have lost. He clenches his fist, frustrated by the injustice of the situation. Renya's eyes narrow, taking in all the details of the complex situation. He agrees that having an F-rank like himself defeat them would be quite effective. He then makes it clear that he fully expects to be compensated for his time. Renya demands 1 gold coin and access to the Academy's transfer gate. AZ explains the transfer gate is a magical artifact for instantaneous long-distance travel. It consumes vast amounts of magic stones but can even cross entire continents. Renya feigns casual interest, saying it sounds convenient but not necessary for him. Desperate to secure his help, AZ offers to double the payment to 2 gold coins. Renya takes a slow, calculating sip of tea, a sly smile on his face. He accepts the job for 1 gold coin, calling AZ his first real friend here. Before AZ can celebrate, Renya states that he has one non-negotiable condition. He demands to know everything about AZ's relationship with the female instructor afterward. Renya's eyes widen slightly, surprised by AZ's flustered reaction. AZ turns beet red, sputtering that Renya is far too easy to read. The scene shows the imposing, fortress-like walls of the Adventurer Academy. Renya and AZ walk together across the large, cobblestone courtyard of the school. They step out of a dark corridor and into the bright, open space of the academy. Renya looks up at the towering structure, observing it's more fortress than school. AZ confirms its dual purpose as a final military stronghold against the demon continent. Renya cynically remarks that the nobles can use the transfer gate to escape danger. AZ announces their arrival as they step onto the top tier of the arena. They look down into the vast, circular coliseum designed for training. AZ explains the 8 magic pillars that create a barrier, nullifying fatal damage. Renya understands this means that no one will actually die during the spars. The sound of a nearby door creaking open catches their attention. A group of boisterous students emerges. AZ identifies them as the problem class. AZ points out the short-haired instructor in the background, naming her Realis. Renya teases AZ about his crush, which AZ vehemently denies. AZ identifies the 2 arrogant students at the front as the ones who defeated Realis. The loud young man is Oren Schumacher II, the son of a prominent general. The girl with golden drill hair is Natalia Fatal, daughter of the nation's duke. Renya frowns, the name Fatal sounding vaguely familiar to him. He comments to AZ that both students have had a thorny look on their faces. AZ explains how the pair challenged Realis only after she was exhausted from other spars. He says with conviction that he does not believe they won in a fair fight. With a grim expression, Renya states that he now understands the situation. He confirms with AZ that his only job is to discipline the 2 boss monkeys. Renya looks down into the arena, his gaze sharp and focused. Realis tries in vain to start the lesson, calling for her students' attention. The unruly students completely ignore her, turning their backs and chatting amongst themselves. 2 students mock her attempts, comparing her voice to a loser dog's barking. Oren loudly declares the adventurer course useless, vowing to have his father replace it. Natalia agrees, stating they have nothing to learn from someone so pathetically weak. Humiliated, Realis clenches her fist, unable to regain control of her class. She makes one final, desperate plea for the students to be quiet. A new voice from above observes that there are many loudmouthed idiots present. The entire class looks up, surprised by the sudden interruption. Renya appears beside Realis, noting the trouble she's having with the brats. A student calls Renya annoying for having the guts to interrupt them. Realis, startled by his sudden appearance, asks who he is. She vaguely recognizes him as an acquaintance of AZ. Renya explains he's just an adventurer here to help out for the day. He gives a quick, subtle glance up toward the stands. AZ, watching from above, gives a small, nervous wave in return. He quickly hides his face with a towel, overwhelmed with embarrassment. Realis is left speechless, while Renya's expression remains cool and composed. Renya turns his attention back to the students, addressing the nobles directly. Oren points an accusatory finger, demanding the rude commoner state his name. Renya introduces himself as F-rank adventurer Renya Kusugi, here at the school's request. The The students erupt in laughter, openly mocking him for his low rank. They jeer that he must be even weaker than their D-rank instructor. Oren laughs boisterously, declaring an F-rank substitute to be utterly pathetic. Renya dismisses their predictable insults as a waste of time, calling out their arrogance. Oren's face darkens with rage, demanding to know what Renya just said. Renya accuses Oren and Natalia of being cowards for fighting Realis when she was tired. Oren furiously denies this, while Natalia simply insists their teacher is weak. Renya tells the small fry to stay back, silencing the downcast Realis. He challenges them to fight him head-on instead of hiding behind their family names. Oren accepts the challenge, vowing to teach Renya a lesson with his family's sword style. Natalia impatiently tells Oren to dispose of the unpleasant man quickly. Renya sighs, completely unimpressed by their childish provocations. Oren takes his fighting stance in the center of the arena, facing Renya. His face a mask of fury, Oren asks if Renya is prepared for their duel. Renya stands ready, calmly inviting his opponent to attack whenever he is ready. Oren's sword is sent spinning through the air, completely disarmed by Renya. Renya instantly closes the distance, his foot planting firmly for the next move. A brutal strike sends Oren flying backward, his mouth open in a silent scream. Renya calmly lowers his blade, its tip sparking against the stone floor. He mutters to himself, surprised that he had used too much force. Dazed and confused, Oren lies slumped against the far wall of the arena. The other students are completely stunned, unable to process what just happened. Renya turns to Realis, casually asking if the demonstration is over now. Realis analyzes the exchange, awed by the impossibly fast slash she witnessed. Renya grumbles, disgusted that the students show no remorse for their weakness. One of Oren's friends whispers from the sideline that it's impossible. Natalia leaps forward, furiously accusing Renya of using a dirty trick. Renya retorts that it's her own fault for being unable to see his technique. He sighs, saying that if she is not satisfied, he has another idea. He challenges the entire class to attack him at once to learn their place. The students are shocked into silence by his incredibly arrogant challenge. An older student tells Natalia her underlings are too cocky and deserve death. The students surround Renya, who tells them not to dare hold back. Oren screams at his classmates to attack with the full intent to kill. Natalia glares at Renya, her face a mask of cold, determined fury. The other students ready their weapons, their expressions set with grim resolve. Renya stands perfectly still, waiting for them with detached indifference. With a primal scream, Oren leads the charge, swinging his sword wildly. Renya's eyes narrow as he effortlessly sidesteps the telegraphed attack. His fist flashes out, connecting brutally with Oren's jaw in a spray of blood. He then pivots, easily parrying a sword strike from another student. He becomes a whirlwind of motion, dismantling the students with precise strikes. One student screams as Renya's elbow smashes viciously into his ribs. He seizes another's arm, the sharp crack of bone echoing through the arena. The student cries out in agony, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle. He drops another, coolly telling him that his attack was far too obvious. A student freezes in terror, completely baffled by Renya's overwhelming power. The hilt of Renya's sword smashes into another student's face with brutal force. Renya's face is a mask of cold fury as he continues his one-sided assault. The student's formation completely breaks down under the relentless pressure. The instructors can only watch in horror, wondering what kind of man he is. Realis stares on, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. The students are utterly routed, beaten into submission across the arena floor. Oren and Natalia watch the carnage unfold, screaming in absolute terror. Natalia desperately asks Oren why they are running from a mere F rank. Oren trembles, his spirit broken, muttering that it's all impossible. Disgusted by his cowardice, Natalia snarls that he is a useless fool. A terrifying aura surrounds Renya as he calmly walks through the defeated. Oren flinches away as Renya passes him without so much as a glance. Renya's foot steps forward, deliberate and calm amidst the surrounding chaos. His expression is one of pure contempt as he dodges another clumsy attack. He delivers a vicious elbow strike to the final charging student's face. The student is sent flying backward through the air, completely defeated. Renya looms over the fallen Oren, taunting him for being scared. He reminds Oren that he was the one who told them to kill. Oren can only twitch on the ground, his mind completely shattered by fear. Natalia finds a final surge of courage, screaming that Oren is the useless one. Renya's eyes widen slightly as he turns to meet her desperate charge. He parries her strike with ease, the force knocking the sword from her grasp. Natalia gasps in pain and shock, her weapon sent flying across the arena. She collapses to the ground, clutching her stinging hand and breathing heavily. Renya towers over her, scornfully asking if she is already finished. His face darkens, telling her that even goblins have more guts than her. Natalia weeps, begging him to stay away while lamenting her humiliation. Renya mockingly reaches for her, pretending to ask for help himself. He grabs her collar, pressing his sword to her throat, continuing his taunts. A desperate voice from off-panel screams for him to stop it. Renya glances over to see the instructor, Realis, pleading with him. Realis begs him to stop, her voice trembling with fear and anguish. Renya releases Natalia and shoulders his sword, the brutal lesson concluded. He tells Realis this was a good lesson, and she was far too gentle. He explains that her only mistake was being too lenient with her students. Realis looks down, unable to respond, a bead of sweat on her temple. The sorcerer Az arrives, calling out to Renya with a stern expression. Az reprimands Renya, saying he went too far just to prove a point. Realis looks at Az, flustered and overwhelmed by the entire situation. Renya scoffs, stating that he simply doesn't know how to hold back. He dismisses the students' complaints, saying they're the ones who ran. He callously remarks they would have died as adventurers anyway. Realis timidly asks Az who this terrifying person is, still in shock. Renya lets out a long, exasperated sigh, his patience completely gone. He furiously yells at Realis not to be scared, reminding her she's an instructor. With a click of his tongue, he turns away from the cowering Natalia. Natalia glares up at him, tears of rage and humiliation in her eyes. She demands to know if he thinks this is all just for fun. Renya walks away, saying he doesn't know and doesn't care. He turns with a chilling smile, warning them of what will happen next time. Natalia lets out a terrified squeak, completely and utterly intimidated. Renya tells Az that he won't be doing such a troublesome job again. He gives a dismissive wave, saying this incompetent adventurer is leaving. He tells them not to call him for such boring tasks in the future. As a final order, he tells them to get the injured students treated. Renya walks alone out of the academy's stone courtyard, his job done. A close-up reveals his grim, weary expression after the ordeal. He sighs, thinking to himself that he really needs to repay his loan. The next morning, Frau the maid awakens with a big, satisfying yawn. She throws open the windows, ready to start her day with cheerful energy. She happily declares that it is another fine day for the household. With a determined expression, she clenches her fists, prepared for her duties. She boasts that the seasoning she learned from her master is perfect. Once the cooking has begun, she moves on to her most important task. It's Frau's job to wake everyone, starting with her beloved master. She chirps that breakfast is ready and it is time for him to wake up. She knows, however, that waking her master is never an easy task. A mischievous, knowing smile spreads across her face as she plans her attack. A dark, menacing aura emanates from Frau, her true, terrifying intentions clear. Renya's eyes snap open, his combat instincts instantly taking over. He leaps from his bed, landing in a defensive crouch by the door. With his katana ready, he realizes this is just his morning wake-up call. He sighs, groaning that this intense routine is getting to be too much. Frau giggles, blaming him for not waking normally and admitting it's fun. Elsewhere, Cheyenne sleeps soundly, completely oblivious to the world around her. Frau stands over the bed, announcing it's morning and time for breakfast. Cheyenne mumbles Renya's name in her sleep, causing Frau's expression to darken. The maid's face becomes a deadpan mask of pure, unadulterated annoyance. She delivers a swift, punishing punch to the sleeping swordswoman's side. For good measure, she follows up with a sharp pinch to Cheyenne's rear. Frau hums happily, thinking that for her, this is a piece of cake. Her eyes narrow, however, as she considers her next, more difficult task. Even for a capable maid like her, one morning chore proves challenging. She hesitantly approaches Lorna's room, softly wishing her a good morning. Lorna sleeps peacefully, her considerable assets on prominent display in her nightgown. A dark jealousy consumes Frau, who wishes ill upon the priestess's chest. She snaps out of it, shocked at her own dark thoughts. Composing herself, she resolves to wake her precious companion without any jealousy. Her unique method involves gently poking and kneading Lorna's chest to rouse her. Lorna stirs, blushing in her sleep, wondering who is being so lewd. Still half asleep, she sits up and groggily greets the shadowed maid. Frau beams, her mission accomplished with a cheerful good morning in return. Her ghostly servants wonder if she's a monster, and she silences them. Lorna shivers, feeling a sudden, inexplicable chill in the room. With the household awake, Frau waves goodbye as the party leaves for the day. She hums a cheerful tune, ready to begin her domestic duties. While her master is away, Frau is a whirlwind of household activity. With her ghostly assistants, she efficiently cleans every corner of the mansion. She explains to the ghosts that her master's mana makes her tasks easy. She sits for a moment, a small, contented smile on her face. Her eye opens suddenly, her expression shifting as she senses something. She holds up her hand, concentrating her newfound power into a physical form. Later, after the party has finished their meal, a new matter arises. Frau approaches Renya, excitedly asking him to look at what she's holding. She opens her hands to reveal 3 gleaming, newly formed magic stones. Renya is surprised, asking if she bought them with his magic. Frau proudly announces that she has leveled up and can now create them. She explains that she crystallized the excess mana she receives from him. Renya realizes the house runs on his magic, but Frau confirms much is left over. She cheekily calls him a pervert, much to his flustered denial. She winks, confident that her efficiency and the stone's purity will improve. Renya tells her to feel free to use the stones for other things. Frau staunchly refuses, insisting the mana is for him to pay his debts. Renya is embarrassed that a child is worried about his finances. He agrees to let her manage it, much to his companion's amusement. He pats her head, and she beams, vowing to do her best for him. Night falls upon the grand mansion, a peaceful darkness settling over it. With the dishes done, Frau considers her work for the day complete. She lets out a yawn, thinking it's time for her to sleep, too. Suddenly, she senses something amiss, her attention drawn to the front of the house. Her pointed ear twitches, her eyes sharp and alert in the quiet room. She realizes she has one last job to do before she can rest. She stands at the bottom of the grand staircase, listening intently. The large front doors of the mansion begin to creak open. She stands before them, ready to perform her duty of greeting any guest. She chides the rudeness of a visitor arriving so late without notice. Stepping onto the porch, she politely asks the darkness to identify itself. A shadowy figure moves with unnatural speed, appearing behind her in a flash. She reacts instantly, knowing she cannot let a rude, nameless guest inside. A sharp blade is suddenly pressed against the back of her neck. In the next instant, she holds the assassin's own weapon, noting it's poisoned. The bandaged assassin recoils in shock, hiding behind a stone pillar. Frau stands calmly on the porch, telling him this is his answer. The assassin's eye widens in pure disbelief at her impossible speed. Her face a mask of terrifying politeness, she offers him a suitable reception. The assassin, recovering his nerve, tells her to enjoy herself as he prepares to attack. He lunges forward, his body surrounded by a dark, murderous aura. A close-up shows his eye, wide with shock and pain from an unseen blow. Jagged speech bubbles indicate his silent scream as he is swiftly defeated. Frau stands in the darkness, her face shadowed, thinking of her important work. Renya appears, katana drawn, asking if she is dealing with an intruder. She turns to him, her expression calm as she calls out his name. She smiles brightly, downplaying the incident as a minor late-night visit. Renya scratches his head, suspecting the attack is related to the academy incident. Frau listens silently, her expression unreadable as he puts the pieces together. She reassures him, telling him not to worry and to leave the house to her. He looks surprised, then accepts, thanking her for her hard work. He turns to go back to bed, leaving the house in her capable hands. Frau reflects that her master saved her, giving her a home and purpose. As Renya walks away, she knows everything she does is for his sake. A close-up shows her contented, blushing smile, full of devotion. Later, she curls up at the foot of his bed, wishing him good night. The next day, Renya stands outside the Adventurers Guild with a sigh. He scans the quest board, noting the lack of any profitable jobs. Thanks to Frau, he thinks, he's surviving, but still deep in debt. He leaves the guild, resolved to pay back his loan bit by bit. A cheerful voice calls out to him as he walks down the street. Kiri, the cat-eared merchant, appears with a bright smile and a salute. Renya is startled by her sudden and energetic appearance. He struggles for a moment, trying to place her familiar face. His mind draws a blank as he tries to recall her name. He finally remembers, pointing at her and calling her Kiri. She's flustered but happy he even remembered her name at all. She quickly laughs it off, saying it's nothing to worry about. He asks how she knew his name, and she confidently affirms she does. She winks, telling him not to underestimate a merchant's information network. She recounts his recent exploits, proving her network is indeed impressive. She then asks how the Japanese sword she sold him is working out. A shadowy figure stands over a kneeling man, who wonders what just happened. Two people walk on a cobblestone path, one musing about a special, otherworldly technique. A woman watches Renya walk by, wondering what a great merchant is doing here. The cat-eared girl, Kiri, reveals she was looking for Renya to show him a new product. Renya, flanked by his companions, makes a grand declaration: they are going to the Elven lands. At a table, Cheyenne finds his decision sudden, while Lorna gently asks what is wrong. Renya's hands tremble as he insists this isn't sudden, he has felt this way for ages. He states that for a very long time, he has been deeply and truly dissatisfied. He erupts with emotion, roaring that he is at his limit and must eat white rice. Cheyenne finds him terrifying, while a confused Lorna asks what this rice is. Cheyenne whispers, wondering if Renya has some kind of mental illness unique to strays. Furious, Renya slams the table, shouting that he can hear them, demanding who they're calling sick. Lorna tries to calm him, suggesting they will listen now that they understand he's normal. A cheerful new voice offers to explain the situation to the confused women. Cheyenne and Lorna turn in surprise, wondering who this girl is and where she came from. The girl poses, introducing herself as Kiri, the super traveling merchant who roams the world. Lorna observes the newcomer, identifying her as a female merchant, while Cheyenne looks skeptical. Kiri explains that she met Renya recently and was simply discussing a business matter. Renya interrupts, his focus absolute, demanding to know where he can find rice. Kiri explains that rice, known here as arroz, is a rare delicacy on this continent. She reveals it is grown on the western continent, the homeland of the elves. Renya is stunned, realizing that a trip to the elven continent means he can get rice. Kiri adds that the elves also cultivate elf beans, which are almost certainly soybeans. His mind is filled with a glorious vision of miso, soy sauce, and white rice. Overwhelmed, he clutches his head, desperately wondering how he can get to the elven country. Kiri smugly notes that the overland journey is impossibly long, crossing the demon continent. Suddenly, Az appears, stating that travel to the elven continent is possible under certain conditions. Kiri looks at Renya knowingly, confirming that he already possesses the means to go. Renya realizes she means the transfer gate, surprised he would need to use it so soon. Kiri picks up her teacup, her tone changing as she begins her business negotiation. She proposes a deal, she needs to expand her trade routes and wants his help. Renya understands her motive, she targeted him as the one most desperate for rice. With a confident smile, Kiri asks for his answer, certain it's a good deal. A vision of home filled his mind, steaming white rice and savory soup. The craving had become an unbearable, agonizing need he could no longer ignore. He reluctantly agreed to her offer, demanding she not pry into his affairs. Kiri beamed, her clever plan having succeeded just as she had hoped. Renya clarified his motivation was purely for rice, and she happily thanked him. She explained Renya's intense desire, as Lorna noted his usual calm was gone. Cheyenne worried they'd need countless magic stones to power the transfer gate. Renya, however, dismissed their concerns, confidently stating it was no problem at all. At his command, the loyal silky maid, Frau, snapped smartly to attention. A mountain of glittering magic stones suddenly appeared, spilling from large sacks. Cheyenne and Lorna stared in shock, wondering how he'd acquired such a fortune. Az calculated they had enough for a round trip for everyone, with change. Frau proudly declared she had worked hard to generate them for her master. The cost was Renya's own energy, pushed to his absolute breaking point. He suddenly erupted, screaming about the lives that had been lost for rice. Kiri mused that his anger stemmed from the primal instinct of a long life. Kiri smoothly invited the others along, suggesting they could enjoy some sightseeing. Cheyenne eagerly agreed, excited by the prospect of a fun, new adventure. Lorna sighed in resignation, knowing she had little choice but to follow. A look of firm resolve settled on Cheyenne's face as she prepared. With the decision made, Kiri announced their departure from the grand mansion. Renya entrusted the house to Frau, who promised her defenses were now perfect. The loyal maid waved as her master and his companions walked away. Their arrival at the academy caught the instructor Az completely by surprise. The bandaged student and Riala stared, startled by Renya's unexpected appearance. The student recognized Renya with a jolt of terror, remembering his defeat. Cheyenne watched the strange reaction, completely puzzled by the student's intense fear. He panicked, wondering why his classmates were with such a terrifying man. Renya stood before the massive, glowing archway, identifying it as the transfer gate. He explained the gate could only take one at a time, so he'd go first. He turned to Az, thanking the instructor for making the necessary arrangements. Az grumbled that this settled his debt for Renya helping with his class. A small, knowing smile touched Renya's lips as their business was concluded. The humbled instructor and student awkwardly thank Renya for his intervention at the academy. Renya coolly accepts, stating his debt to Az is repaid, and tells them to get along. Flushed with embarrassment, Oren tells him to mind his own business and just leave. Well then, Renya says, turning on his heel, shall we be on our way? With a determined fist, he declares their grand destination, the fabled Elven Kingdom. He leads the way with purpose, stepping towards the magical transfer gate. His form disappears into a blinding flash of light as he enters the portal. Emerging on the other side, he shields his eyes from the brilliant, disorienting light. He lowers his hand, his vision clearing to reveal their new, unfamiliar surroundings. A trio of stern-faced elves stands before them, their presence cold and unwelcoming. Their leader asks if they are Renya Kusugi's party, sent from the Klefkal Academy. "Welcome to the Elven Kingdom," an elf formally states, though her tone lacks warmth. They now stand within the grand halls of the Elven School, a place of refined beauty. Their guide begins to lead them through the elegant, ornate halls of the academy. She introduces herself as Kruar, a student of this school and their appointed guide. She explains that she was tasked with guiding them at the request of Klefkal Academy. Renya politely introduces himself in turn, hoping to make a good first impression. An awkward, heavy silence hangs in the air following his unreciprocated greeting. Annoyed, Renya turns to his own party, chiding them for their rude silence. Kiri points out that he can speak Elvish, but his companions cannot understand a word. The ever-resourceful Kiri steps forward, introducing herself as a traveling merchant. She cheerfully offers to act as a translator for Cheyenne and Lorna, much to Renya's relief. Renya realizes his fluency is due to the otherworldly language skill from the goddess. Lorna expresses her amazement, but Kiri coolly dismisses it as a basic business skill. A good merchant, she winks, must always be able to speak the local language. Renya watches her smooth intervention with a silent, calculating expression. Kiri formally presents Cheyenne and Lorna to Kruar, stating their desire to sightsee. Kruar's gaze sweeps over the two human women with barely concealed disdain. Her critical eyes linger on their forms, passing a silent, harsh judgment upon them. She tells Kiri that she seems more reasonable than the others of her fleshy race. With a venomous glare, she declares she will not speak the vulgar human tongue. Lorna, oblivious to the insult, simply smiles on with a look of polite confusion. Renya and Cheyenne, however, feel the chill of her words, sensing the trouble ahead. Their elven guide introduces them to Grankane, a city built into colossal trees. Their elven guide, Kruar, begins her tour of the port city. She explains it is a major hub for trade with the mainland. Elves, she boasts, possess far greater magical power than humans. Their magic stone technology powers everything, including the city's defenses. Cheyenne admires the beautiful elves, while Renya thinks about agriculture. Renya asks if there is a place to taste their local crops. Kruar offers to show him a signature bean product, which he eagerly accepts. They arrive at a shop where large barrels hold a dark paste. Renya cautiously brings a small spoonful of the substance to his lips. The instant he tastes it, his eyes fly open in disbelief. He realizes with a jolt that the flavor is unmistakably miso. He is overcome with emotion, never expecting this taste in another world. He sweats, processing the profound and familiar discovery. He asks Kruar if the original creator was perhaps a stray person. She confirms strays made miso and shoyu, and Renya notes the names are the same. Kruar explains the seasonings are indispensable for their agricultural diet. Renya gulps, now having high hopes for the quality of their rice. Suddenly, a commotion from the street interrupts their conversation. Lorna rushes over, pleading for help with some bothersome elf men. Kruar clicks her tongue, muttering about the sexual harassment tribe. Renya looks on, completely bewildered by the strange situation. An elf man poetically praises Lorna's beautiful proportions. He wonders aloud if all humans are as beautifully built as she is. Lorna is flustered and confused by the intense, unwanted attention. The elves are particularly captivated by her bountiful, motherly chest. Lorna's heart pounds, unsure what to make of this strange feeling. She is completely overwhelmed by the sudden, somewhat harassing popularity. To make matters stranger, all of the elven men are incredibly handsome. Kiri playfully teases Renya about the beautiful woman at his side. Cheyenne clarifies that he shouldn't lump all elves with the reformist scum. Renya, intrigued, asks if there is some kind of political conflict. Kruar clenches her fist, visibly angered by the mere mention of it. She begins to explain the unfortunate incident 10 years ago with a human duchess. Before then, the elven standard of beauty was slender, and all were content. The elven men, however, were profoundly shocked by the duchess's large bust. Their entire worldview was shattered, realizing their old ways were wrong. A new faction claimed it was a divine revelation of prosperity. They developed a fervent desire to know and experience this new truth. Their movement grew, chanting that large chests were the ultimate ideal. The conservatives were outraged, calling them fools who had gone mad. They insisted that shape was what mattered, and size was irrelevant. They praised the traditional elven form as a beautiful, hardy flower. The human figure, they argued, was nothing more than excessive, useless fat. The reformists called the conservatives stubborn old fools with outdated beliefs. The conservatives retorted that small chests were the true teaching of the gods. The debate raged on, big is justice, versus modesty is a virtue. Meanwhile, the elven women argued about elasticity and sensitivity. Kruar explains that this controversy has divided the nation's men. This city, with its gate to the human world, became a reformist stronghold. Renya bluntly asks if elves are idiots, earning Kruar's angry agreement. He concedes, however, that human men are quite foolish in that regard too. He compliments Kruar, suggesting men seek other traits when all are so beautiful. The unexpected praise leaves Kruar blushing and completely speechless. The bizarre cultural lesson is cut short by a horse's terrified scream. A panicked horse with an unconscious rider gallops wildly through the street. The rider is thrown from the saddle, crashing hard onto the cobblestones. Onlookers scream in terror, yelling for someone to stop the beast. Renya's hand instinctively moves towards the hilt of his katana. But before he can act, Cheyenne leaps gracefully onto the runaway horse. The elven crowd stares in utter shock at her incredible athletic feat. She expertly calms the trembling animal, telling it everything is all right. Renya watches her, a look of genuine, impressed surprise on his face. They rush to the fallen soldier as the crowd calls for a doctor. The soldier struggles to speak, wanting to pass on a message. He gasps for them to hurry and prepare the city's defenses. With his dying breath, he warns that the forest labyrinth has overflowed. Renya and Kruar are stunned, repeating the labyrinth's ominous name. The soldier's final words warn of a great monster army's attack. In the darkness, a sinister, unseen grin spreads with anticipation. In full color, the dying soldier repeats his warning of the overflow. His eyes close in pain as his life begins to fade. He warns that a massive army of monsters is on its way. Renya and Kruar share a look of grim understanding and shock. The elven crowd praises Cheyenne's heroic actions and beautiful form. Cheyenne, not understanding the language, just smiles awkwardly. Renya dryly notes that now Cheyenne is the one getting all the attention. Cheyenne just laughs, flustered and pleased by the unexpected praise. Kruar urgently calls out to Renya, her expression now serious. Renya lets out a quiet sigh, his brief moment of peace over. They are quickly escorted to a secure room in a government building. An elven guard stands watch as they sit around a table, waiting. Kruar informs them an emergency has occurred and asks them to wait. Renya warns the guard, who is staring at Lorna, not to wander. The elven guard blushes, caught off guard and embarrassed. Lorna clears her throat as Renya looks on with an exasperated sigh. She wonders aloud if the country can handle a crisis like this. Renya breaks the tense silence, beginning his line of questioning. He asks for details about the forest labyrinth the soldier mentioned. Cheyenne realizes with a start that Renya has never been there. Kiri explains it's a vast underground dungeon deep within the forest. A map shows its location and its connection to other major forests. Cheyenne finds this strange, having never heard of it overflowing before. She thoughtfully considers the gravity of this unprecedented event. Renya listens intently, processing the new and dangerous information. His attention shifts from the strategic problem back to his party. He asks Lorna why she has been in such a foul mood. Lorna's eye twitches, her anger barely contained. She snaps that she is not angry, a claim Renya clearly doubts. She finally explodes, ranting about the sexual harassment from the elves. A sudden knock at the door cuts her furious tirade short. Kruar, the elven guide, enters the room, apologizing for the delay. She informs Renya, Kiri, and Lorna that a grave situation has developed. She regretfully tells them they can no longer stay and must return home. The party is stunned by the sudden and unwelcome order to leave. Renya demands an explanation, refusing to leave without understanding the situation. He asks if this is related to the forest labyrinth overflowing. Kruar clenches her fist, confirming that his suspicion is correct. An army of 20,000 monsters is now marching on their city. Kiri and Lorna are horrified by the sheer number of monsters. The shocking revelation of 20,000 monsters hangs in the air. The garrison of 200 elves monitoring the forest has been wiped out. The report details the brutal fate of non-combatants in the onslaught. She describes how the victims were ultimately devoured by goblins. The horrific images of the massacre flash through their minds. Lorna calculates the horde will arrive in just 4 or 5 hours. An elven soldier reports their meager defenses of only 700 fighters. Reinforcements have been requested but will take at least a day to arrive. Their only hope is to buy time for the city's residents to escape. She asks them to flee while the city holds the line. Her voice trails off as she explains their desperate, sacrificial plan. Renya clarifies that they want the gate destroyed from the other side. He questions the city's magical defenses, which were not designed for war. A heavy, oppressive silence falls over the group at the table. Lorna asks Kruar if the elves truly intend to fight to the death. Kruar offers a small, determined smile in the face of certain doom. Lorna tells her not to worry, that it would shame the elves. Though a student, she declares she will hold out for their escape. Kiri listens to the elf's brave declaration with a concerned expression. Renya and Kiri exchange a silent, knowing glance. Cheyenne asks Kruar a pointed question about her age. Renya mentally calculates her age to be about 15 in human years. Kruar notes that 70 is quite old for a human. Renya scoffs internally, thinking she is still just a child. Kiri observes Renya's subtle, yet telling, reaction. Renya stands, agreeing that they should return home as requested. Cheyenne is shocked, grabbing his arm and questioning his decision. She protests that she cannot simply abandon the elves to their fate. Cheyenne and Lorna share a tense, conflicted look. Lorna firmly tells Cheyenne that this is not their place to interfere. Kiri agrees, telling Cheyenne to know her place. Renya is right. Cheyenne grits her teeth, frustrated but unable to argue. Kruar watches the exchange, a calm resolve on her face. She addresses Cheyenne by name, getting her attention. She thanks Cheyenne for stopping the runaway horse earlier. Kruar bows deeply to the party, expressing her gratitude one last time. Renya says nothing, his gaze fixed on the elven student. Kiri watches Renya, a thoughtful, calculating expression on her face. Cheyenne looks down, her heart heavy with the decision to leave. Lorna closes her eyes, accepting their grim but necessary retreat. Kruar offers a final prayer for their safe journey back home. Renya quietly asks if her words are meant as sarcasm. He tells the stunned Kruar that he was about to say the same. A small, knowing smile touches Kruar's lips. Outside, bells ring as people are urged to evacuate the city. The party walks against the flow of fleeing citizens. Renya remains silent, his expression unreadable as he observes the chaos. A line of elven students, ready for battle, salute their superiors. An elven officer shouts at the young recruits to hurry up. Cheyenne watches the young elves marching to their doom, her face pained. She turns away from the tragic sight, unable to watch any longer. She remains silent, her inner turmoil clear on her face. Kiri calls out to Renya, seeing her chance to speak. She asks if she can speak with him alone for a moment. On a quiet path, Kiri remarks on their terribly bad luck. She laments being caught in a war at such an inconvenient time. She suggests they could turn this disaster into a business opportunity. She hints that helping the elves might also benefit Renya. Renya's sharp gaze remains fixed on the path ahead. Kiri smiles, knowing she has piqued his interest. He asks what her plan is, suspecting she wants him to fight. She replies that he's correct, though the details are different. Renya, irritated, tells her to get to the point. Kiri teasingly notes that his impatience is a sign of his worry. She turns to face him, ready to make her pitch. Renya's eye narrows as he listens to her proposal. She asks him directly if he has the power to fight 20,000. The sheer audacity of her question shocks him into silence. She states that she is betting on his latent ability to win. He scoffs, asking if she, a merchant, can calculate the odds. She counters, asking if he doesn't understand the futility of it. She acknowledges that with his current skills, he would fail. But she points out that is only if he relies on his sword. A spark of realization hits Renya as he understands her meaning, sorcery. He protests that he only knows 2 weak, useless spells. Kiri smiles, explaining this is where her new proposal begins. She offers to teach him magic powerful enough to fight an army. In return, he will aid the elves, making her business easier. Renya listens, a thoughtful, almost amused smile on his lips. Kiri knows she has him, asking if he can abandon the city. He accuses her of trying to manipulate him with her roundabout words. He notes her merchant-like talent for making others do her dirty work. He refuses to be her pawn and throw his life away. Kiri's confident smile doesn't waver for an instant. No, she declares, you alone possess the power to do this. Renya listens, his expression hardening with resolve. He quietly remarks on her overwhelming confidence in his abilities. She reminds him of the hundreds of magic stones he created. A vision of Frau confirms this feat is impossible for normal mages. Renya admits that he has several times the power of a skilled sorcerer. He smiles, acknowledging that his power is based on more than just logic. Renya coolly observes that mere willpower alone will not be enough for this fight. Kiri presents her offer, promising to teach him how to use his latent power. Renya remains silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful and unreadable. With a sly smile, Kiri presses him, asking what he thinks of her proposal. She repeats her question as the onlooking elves listen with growing curiosity. Renya's thoughts drift, and he suddenly recalls the true reason he came here. He reminds Kiri that his only objective in the Elven lands was to get rice. Impatient, Renya tells her to stop wasting time and teach him the spell immediately. Outside the stately building, the mood is tense as his companions wait. Lorna wonders aloud what kind of conversation Renya and Kiri are having. Cheyenne stands beside her, her worried silence speaking volumes. Lorna's expression is filled with concern and a hint of suspicion. A sudden shout of "Lorna-sama" makes both women turn in surprise. Lorna's face immediately falls into a look of pure dread and annoyance. The two young elven soldiers from before rush towards them with determined expressions. They kneel before Lorna, offering a deep and sincere apology for their earlier rudeness. One elf explains they had something vital to tell her before heading to battle. Lorna looks on, confused, as she cannot understand their elven speech. She explains to them that they are marching into a fight for their lives. The elves grimly acknowledge this, knowing they likely won't survive the battle. They confess they wanted to see her one last time to burn her image into their minds. Lorna's eyes widen slightly, touched by the gravity of their farewell. The young soldiers look up at her, their faces set with a tragic resolve. She tells them she would gladly give her life to save them and the city. They ask only that she praise the elves who fought with a simple, "well done." Cheyenne and Lorna are taken aback by their humble and poignant final request. An elf bows his head, his face shadowed with the sorrow of his fate. Lorna's expression softens with deep compassion for the young men facing death. She gently tells them to raise their heads, saying she understands their sincerity. As a holy woman, she closes her eyes and offers a prayer for their safety. The two elves are overcome with gratitude, their faces flushing with emotion. One weeps with joy, declaring he has no regrets and can now die happily. The other asks to use the only human phrase he knows to show his respect. Lorna smiles gently, wishing them safety on the battlefield. A memory flashes of the elves giving a thumbs up, toasting to her breasts. Lorna freezes in place, her face unseen as the embarrassing memory returns. She pivots sharply and stomps away as the soldiers march off to their posts. Clenching her fist, she mutters that elves are the worst and she wants her prayer back. Cheyenne can only stare, her mouth agape in disbelief at the bizarre scene. Renya and Kiri emerge from the building, Renya asking if they were waiting long. The scene shows the building where the fate of the city is being decided. Renya calmly announces to his shocked party that he has decided to stay and fight. Lorna and Cheyenne demand to know why he would possibly side with the elves. Renya lets out a small sigh, annoyed at having to state the obvious. He explains that leaving without getting the rice he came for is simply irritating. He adds that it is a good chance to put the elves in his debt for the future. Lorna is aghast, questioning if that is truly his only reason for fighting. Cheyenne clenches her fists, excited that if Renya is fighting, she will too. Renya immediately shuts her down, stating only he and Kiri are going to the battlefield. He gives them a grim order, they are not to let the monsters pass the gate. Cheyenne protests vehemently, shouting that she will fight and cannot abandon them. Renya calmly acknowledges her feelings but says now is not the time to indulge them. He asks her a pointed question, are the elves or the humans of Klefkul more important? He tells her to consider the situation and she will understand his logic. Cheyenne lowers her head, defeated by his irrefutable and cold reasoning. Lorna watches Renya, her mind trying to understand this complex man. Cheyenne reluctantly accepts her role, resolving to do what she can from her position. Lorna asks if he is truly serious about fighting 20,000 monsters. Renya notes that Kiri has somehow maneuvered him into a position where he can win. He admits that while he can survive, he cannot guarantee the city's safety. That is why, he explains, he is entrusting the final defense to them. Lorna understands his logic and agrees to place her trust in his plan. She closes her eyes, promising to pray for his safe return from the battle. Renya simply says, I'm off, turning to head toward the fight. He walks away as Cheyenne and Kiri call out his name, watching him go. Cheyenne feels a pang of guilt, knowing she is relying on him to do all the fighting. With a face full of earnest emotion, she begs him to please save the elves. Renya pauses for a moment, his profile showing he has heard her plea. He turns back with a slight smirk, casually agreeing to give it a shot. Lorna places a comforting hand on Cheyenne's shoulder as they watch him go. At the city's palisade, a commander shouts for the barrier magic to be reinforced. The commander, identified as Skuld, rallies his men for the coming onslaught. Skuld privately worries about how long their forces can last against such numbers. He notices a soldier staring off into the distance, seemingly distracted. He angrily yells at the soldier, demanding to know why he is slacking off. The soldier looks back, confused, as Skuld also sees what has caught his attention. Renya and Kiri arrive at the front line, confusing the elven soldiers. Renya loudly asks for the commander, ignoring the murmurs around him. Kruar appears from behind a post, calling out his name in shock. She demands to know why he is here when she explicitly told him to flee. Renya tells her to get the commander, stating he is here as reinforcements. Kruar clutches her head in exasperation, unable to believe what she's hearing. He physically shoves her face aside, repeating his demand to see the commander. A stern voice cuts through the chaos, asking what is going on. Renya turns his sharp gaze to the source of the authoritative voice. Skold introduces himself as the commander, stating he has no time for them. With a thud, Renya drops several large sacks at the commander's feet. He introduces himself and offers the spilled magic stones in exchange for a place in the battle. Skold stares in utter disbelief at the massive quantity of magic stones. Renya tells him to use the stones to power the city's defensive barrier. Skold is grateful but demands to know who this mysterious human actually is. He turns to Kruar, asking if she knows Renya and can vouch for him. Kruar stammers, at a complete loss for how to explain their complicated relationship. A scout runs up, shouting that the monster army has reached the barrier. Skold grits his teeth, acknowledging the report and saying he is on his way. He tells Renya he is grateful for the stones but has no time to spare. He runs off, ordering his men to reinforce the barrier's defensive line immediately. Kruar confronts Renya again, demanding to know why he didn't return home. Renya ignores her emotional plea, instead asking for tactical details about the barrier. He repeats that he is here to help, as they are clearly short on manpower. Kruar admits they are short-staffed, but insists that is not the point. Renya listens, his profile sharp and unreadable as he assesses her words. Intimidated by his silence, Kruar stops talking, a bead of sweat on her temple. Renya states there is no time, demanding she explain the barrier's function. From the darkness of the forest, a horde of goblins emerges, their eyes glowing. The heavy thud of the monster's feet shakes the ground as they advance. Kruar kneels, explaining the magical barrier that surrounds the entire city of Grankane. This barrier is a trap, reacting to any who lack the elven god's blessing. The forest's plants ensnare invaders, a potent defense against weaker monsters. The barrier normally covers a wide area, but their foe is a massive army. She explains their true goal is not victory, but buying time for evacuation. A diagram shows the barrier focused into a kill zone before the defense line. The trap will halt the enemy, allowing elves to thin their numbers from afar. Renya coolly agrees that it is a sound strategy, given their disadvantages. Kruar still worries, doubting they can hold out until reinforcements arrive. Her hand trembles with fear, her knuckles white as she grips her bow. Renya's sharp eyes narrow, taking in the grim truth of their situation. He observes that beyond the guards, 200 of the defenders are mere students. He asks Cheyenne for her assessment, and she declares the situation is favorable. The barrier, she explains, will make the enemy a perfect, concentrated target. Cheyenne adds this will allow Renya to finally unleash his power without restraint. Renya and Kruar stand in silence, the unspoken tension hanging between them. He offers a word of comfort, admitting it might not change anything. He promises to support their front line so they can fight with all their might. Kruar is stunned into silence by his unexpected and confident promise. Renya looks on, his expression calm and resolute as he makes his vow. A nearby elf guard asks Kruar if all humans are such unbelievable idiots. Renya admits he doesn't understand these humans, confusing Kruar with his words. Cheyenne looks on, flustered and a bit embarrassed by Renya's bold display. Renya smirks, telling Kruar that having a loudmouth around isn't all bad. A small, almost imperceptible smile touches Kruar's lips as she considers this. She finally agrees, a flicker of genuine hope returning to her expression. A cry from the watchtower shatters the moment, the enemy army is close. A defender's eye widens in alarm, their gaze fixed on the approaching threat. The horde rushes from the woods, now only 200 units from the wall. The ground shakes as they close the distance, the range now only 150. The demon general grins, seeing the prey laid out before him for the slaughter. He orders his monstrous troops to go forth and hunt to their heart's content. From the palisade, the defenders watch the terrifying horde swarm the clearing. The sheer scale of the enemy army is revealed as it fills the battlefield. Goblin archers at the front of the horde draw their crude, short bows. The demon general's wide, toothy grin promises a swift and bloody battle. Renya and the elves watch from the wall as the first attack begins. The goblin archers prepare to loose a volley from a distance of 150. A hail of arrows whistles through the air, arcing towards the palisade. Elven defenders cry out in pain and shock as the unexpected volley hits them. Panic spreads as the young elves shout that the enemy is already shooting. An officer is struck, cursing as he orders his men not to waste their arrows. He commands them to hold their fire and let the enemy get much closer. The goblin vanguard screeches with bloodlust, charging forward with reckless abandon. The horde thunders across the field, a chaotic wave of monstrous bodies. A soldier reports the vanguard has reached the 100-unit mark and is still charging. Scold, the commander, sees his moment, yelling that now is the time to act. Kruar's eyes blaze with intensity as she screams the command to activate the barrier. She and other mages slam their hands to the ground, invoking ancient spirits. She chants, calling upon the earth to protect them and grant them victory. A massive wave of magical energy erupts from the ground before the wall. The charging goblins are caught completely by surprise by the magical trap. A goblin's face contorts in pain and shock as the earth comes alive. A thick vine wraps around a goblin's leg, yanking it off its feet. The creatures are thrown through the air, their bodies helplessly entangled. A goblin screams in terror as magical vines constrict tightly around its neck. The vines pierce another's body, ending its charge in a spray of black blood. The forest's wrath descends, leaving the vanguard crushed and ensnared. The demon general looks on, annoyed, asking what this pathetic trick is. He scoffs, recognizing the elves' forest magic but finding it unimpressive. His shadowed face turns to his larger troops, his voice a low, menacing growl. He orders his hulking soldiers to simply tear through the pathetic trap. An orc, caught in the vines, struggles and chokes as it tries to break free. With a roar of pure effort, a massive orc rips the thick vines apart. The larger monsters, glowing with dark power, begin to brute force their way through. An elven soldier curses in frustration as their magical defense is torn apart. A lookout reports the enemy's advance has slowed, but they are now breaking through. Kruar grits her teeth, accepting that the enemy will not be deterred. She turns to her troops, her voice a sharp command that cuts through the chaos. She rallies them, roaring that they will deliver retribution for their fallen brethren. She issues a clear order to the archers and mages on the defensive wall. She draws her own bow, commanding them all to take their positions. The elven mages begin to chant, gathering power for their next magical assault. The archers are ordered to aim, invoking the forest's blessing upon their arrows. With a final command to fire, they unleash a volley of magical arrows. A goblin looks up, its face a mask of shock as a glowing arrow descends. The magical arrows find their marks, striking down orcs and beastkin alike. A large orc stumbles and falls, an arrow buried deep in its shoulder. Another orc grimaces in pain as multiple arrows pierce its thick hide. The fallen monsters litter the ground, but the horde is still overwhelming. A scout yells that the enemy continues to advance, they are not stopping. Kruar realizes the monsters are not flinching, suspecting a commander is directing them. She glances back at the terrified civilian families she is fighting to protect. She knows she must buy more time and orders the second volley to be prepared. As she gives the command to fire, Kiri tells Renya the stage is set. Renya observes that the elves are now completely focused on the enemy horde. He speaks a single word, a name for the coming storm, Ereshur. Kiri explains it's a high-level wind spell that creates a powerful tornado. She reveals she read of a way to amplify its power with parallel spell activation. She eagerly tells him to try it, but he stares back with deep suspicion. Kiri explains the procedure, and Renya raises his hand to begin the spell. He calls upon his power, telling it to fill the atmosphere around him. He visualizes the air above the enemy, gathering and compressing into a vortex. The air begins to howl as the wind becomes a raging, violent tornado. A goblin stares up in terror as a voice muses about controlling the wind. A hand reaches towards the sky, gathering energy, intent on gaining control. The elven guide, Kruar, senses a strange and unsettling shift in the wind. She looks over, wondering what on earth Renya is trying to accomplish. Renya's focus is absolute, his mind reaching out to command the very heavens. Kiri calculates the frigid temperatures of the upper atmosphere with a knowing look. The elven soldiers on the wall look up, confused by the sudden change in the sky. A powerful voice commands the gathered energy to move towards the enemy lines. Kiri smiles wickedly, imagining the devastation of slamming that cold air into the ground. High above, a tiny vortex of darkness begins to form in the clouds. Renya roars his incantation, commanding the tempest to tear the very earth asunder. The concentrated blast of wind and ice hurtles towards the unsuspecting army below. A voice announces the completion of the ultimate spell, Super Strong Macro Burst. The massive tornado slams into the forest, a cataclysm of nature's fury unleashed. The goblins in the vanguard look up, their simple minds unable to process the threat. A hulking monster is instantly engulfed in a blinding, explosive flash of white light. The demon general is caught in the blast, roaring in disbelief at the sudden chaos. The elves on the wall watch in horror, wondering if the blast is coming for them. Renya sweats, realizing the spell is far more powerful than he ever intended. His eyes widen in shock as the massive shockwave barrels towards their own position. Kiri panics, screaming for the elves to raise a magical barrier immediately. The wall of freezing air rushes towards the palisade as Kruar screams Renya's name. She reaches for him in terror as the unstoppable force is about to hit them. Kiri and Kruar stare in disbelief at the aftermath of the devastating spell. A massive, swirling column of energy rises from the battlefield, a testament to its power. From a distance, Lorna whispers Renya's name, her heart filled with concern. Icy winds continue to howl across the now desolate and shattered forest. Renya, Kruar, and Kiri brace themselves against the freezing gale, shielding their faces. Renya thanks Kruar for her help, relieved they survived the spell's backlash. Kruar clutches her head, feeling the immense strain of casting the defensive magic. An elven soldier stares at the scene, his mind unable to comprehend the destruction. The battlefield is a frozen wasteland, littered with the corpses of countless monsters. Lorna stares at the crater, wondering if Renya was truly capable of such power. Renya and Kruar exchange a stunned glance, still reeling from what just happened. Kiri, terrified by the near-death experience, hides nervously behind Renya. Renya turns on Kiri, furious, yelling at her for not warning him about the spell's power. He grabs her head, shaking her as he screams about the idiotic force that nearly killed them all. Lorna lectures them both for their recklessness as they devolve into a shouting match. Renya can't believe a spell he had never used before could be so powerful. He clutches his head, feeling the dizzying drain of his depleted mana. An elven maiden asks if he's alright, but he waves her off, saying he's fine. A scout reports to Commander Skuld that the tornado has wiped out half the enemy. Skuld repeats the news in utter disbelief, half the enemy forces are gone. He stares out at the crater, amazed that it all happened in a single instant. A cold wind blows across the smoking, ice-covered ruins of the monster army. The demon general pulls himself from the wreckage, wondering what just hit him. He examines his cracked armor, knowing his magic resistance barely saved him. Standing over a fallen beast, he curses that his entire vanguard was annihilated. He crushes a goblin's head underfoot, dismissing his fallen troops as worthless pawns. He clicks his tongue in fury, his face a mask of pure, simmering rage. He rallies his remaining troops, demanding to know who just tried to flee. He vows to personally execute any soldier who dares to retreat from the battle. Under a mysterious symbol, the monster horde roars, their fighting spirit renewed. An elven scout cries out, unable to believe the monsters are still advancing. A soldier reports to Skuld that the surviving enemies are continuing their assault. Skuld realizes a powerful commander is forcing the horde to fight to the death. He is told their barrier has been weakened, and he curses their terrible luck. He orders his troops to regroup and for the mages to get more magic stones. Renya's party understands that the enemy commander is the key to winning the battle. Renya admits that while he weakened the barrier, he now sees a path to victory. His expression hardens as he declares a swordsman's true job is to cut things down. Kiri smiles slyly, knowing Renya feels sick if he isn't in the middle of a fight. Kruar asks if he plans to charge the enemy camp alone. He confirms he does. She questions his sanity, reminding him over 10,000 enemies still remain. She clenches her fist, pleading to know why he would do so much for them. Renya remains silent for a long moment, his profile calm and resolute. He explains that he supposes he is just one of those idiots who prefers simple solutions. He smirks, saying his plan is simple, kill the general and save the elves. Kruar is left speechless, her heart pounding at his reckless bravery. With her mind made up, she calls out his name to stop him. She takes a single, determined step forward on her heeled boots. She pulls Renya into a sudden, passionate kiss, her hair whipping in the wind. Renya is completely stunned, his eyes wide with shock at her bold action. She pulls away, both of them breathless and flustered from the unexpected moment. Kiri watches from the side, her hands clasped over her mouth in a silent gasp. Kruar explains she has just bestowed upon him the protection of the elven god. Now he can fight unhindered, and a kiss was the most effective method. She points at him, trying to regain her composure, telling him to feel honored. She becomes incredibly flustered, her face crimson as she admits it was her first kiss. She mumbles that it might be her first and last, wishing for a better situation. She adds that she can't have him dying on her now, her voice barely a whisper. Renya closes his eyes and gives a soft, understanding smile, saying he gets it. He thanks her for the elven spirit, much to her blushing astonishment. Waving goodbye, he tells her to survive so they can try again in a better place. Kruar is left a flustered wreck as Kiri watches with a knowing, mischievous grin. Renya vanishes into the dark, misty forest, a lone warrior on a vital mission. He crouches low, knowing that despite his bold words, he needs a proper plan. He realizes charging blindly is pointless and considers what to do next. A grim smile forms as he decides to cut them down in the most flamboyant way possible. He is immediately confronted by a hulking orc flanked by 2 goblin guards. His eyes narrow, his entire demeanor shifting into that of a focused killer. He moves in a blur, weaving between the goblins with impossible, fluid grace. With a clean upward slash, he slices a goblin's head from its shoulders. Another goblin is sent flying back, its body torn apart by his powerful strike. He executes a perfect thrust, impaling a 3rd goblin clean through its chest. He lands, his katana trailing magical flames, a silent challenge to his foes. He feels his mana returning, certain the cold air will prevent a forest fire. A disembodied voice calls his name, asking if he can hear her. A fiery, spectral image of Kruar appears, and he confirms it is her. Back at the wall, Kruar explains she has forged a magical path for communication. Renya reflects on the power of Kruar's mana-infused kiss, noting how useful it was. An elven soldier reports a powerful magic signature 30 degrees to the left. He suspects it is the enemy commander, likely a member of the demon race. Renya grimaces, hoping this demon isn't as unpleasant as the scientist, Emil. The soldier warns that demons are dangerous, advising retreat if the fight is unwinnable. A thin, predatory smile plays across Renya's lips as he prepares for battle. In a dark clearing, Renya stands before the hulking, armored demon general. He sizes up his opponent, observing that this is no mere orc. The general glares back with contempt, demanding to know who this human is. He shifts into a battle stance, ready to crush the intruder. He wonders aloud why a human is here, after spotting a strangely dressed elf. The demon general questions the human's presence in this part of the forest. Renya cuts him off, asking directly if he is the general of this army. The general lets out a booming laugh, asking what it matters if he is. Renya states that he has one question he needs to confirm first. He points out that half the demon's army is dead and asks why he hasn't retreated. Renya's mind flashes back to his old world's wars, where such losses meant a total rout. The general stares at Renya, utterly baffled by the question. A small, arrogant smirk begins to form on the demon's face. He erupts into a condescending, full-throated laugh at the human's foolishness. He mocks Renya, asking if he's sleepwalking to call such minor losses a rout. Boasting that he is unharmed, he claims his troops are easily replaced. Renya internally questions if this general is simply an idiot. The demon continues his rant, vowing to trample the city and crush the weak. Renya lets out a soft sigh, feeling pity for the demons who died for such a fool. The general, misreading the silence, continues his posturing, believing he has won the argument. A wide, vicious grin spreads across his face as he decides to accept Renya's provocation. He declares he will teach Renya that one man cannot possibly defeat their entire horde. The general swings his massive greatsword, unleashing a powerful attack. Renya is puzzled, wondering why the attack is coming from so far away. A massive shockwave of energy tears through the air toward him. Renya leaps back with lightning speed, narrowly dodging the invisible blade. He is shocked to see the tree behind him has been cleanly sliced in two. The general expresses surprise that the human dodged the attack on his first try. He smirks, admitting that Renya is more skilled than the average small fry. Renya recognizes the attack as a wind blade, similar to the one Emil used. He realizes the greatsword is enchanted and that a direct hit would be fatal. The general calls the first attack a mere greeting, promising to get serious now. He roars, vowing to crush the human who destroyed his vanguard. As the general charges, Renya ducks low, preparing to move inside his guard. Renya becomes a blur of motion, his speed far exceeding the demon's. He weaves past the general's clumsy swing, their faces passing in an instant. Finding his opening, Renya prepares to deliver a decisive counterattack. He brings his katana up in a devastating slash, catching the general by surprise. The blade flashes, a clean and precise arc of steel. Renya lands behind his opponent, his attack having found its mark. The general looks down in shock as his armored gauntlet sparks from the impact. Renya notes that he intended to sever the arm, but the armor was unexpectedly tough. The general roars, demanding to know what kind of sword can damage his armor. Renya calmly suggests he ask the merchant, deducing the armor is why the tornado spell failed. He realizes the demon's confidence stems from his enchanted sword and armor. Renya lets out another quiet sigh of weary understanding. He tells the general that he has now figured out one important thing. The general's powerful equipment would indeed be a difficult challenge for the elves. Yet, despite his gear, he relies on crude strength and calls others weak. Renya looks at him with utter disdain, declaring that the general is the true small fry. A vein twitches on the demon's temple, the insult hitting its mark. Renya muses that demons were supposed to be formidable, wondering if this one is just weak. The general's face contorts into a mask of pure, unrestrained rage. He begins screaming, "Kill," over and over, his composure completely shattered. Vowing to beat him to a pulp, he charges forward mindlessly. Renya's katana flashes again, severing the general's armored hand at the wrist. The general can only gasp in disbelief as Renya moves past him. Appearing behind him, Renya explains the first slash was a feint to target his armor's gaps. The general screams in agony as he clutches the stump of his arm. Renya states that in his world, there's a concept known as a war criminal. He had intended to end this quickly, but now things have changed. He declares that the general must now atone for slaughtering the elves at the fortress. The general seethes, his words a stream of filth and curses. He screams at Renya, telling him not to mess with him. He swings wildly with his remaining arm, only for Renya to sever that hand as well. The general stares in horror at his now useless, bleeding arms. Renya's terrifying presence overwhelms him. He questions if this is truly a human strength. The demon general collapses to his knees, whimpering in absolute terror. He desperately orders his goblin minions to attack Renya and become his shield. Renya looks down on him, remarking on how pathetic a commander he is. He stomps down hard, pinning the general's armored boot to the ground. The general throws his head back and screams in excruciating pain. Renya calmly states he only stabbed his foot to stop him from running away. With a chilling smile, he asks if he should have used the elves as monster bait. The general, enraged and trapped, vows to kill him. He screams again for his minions to save him and kill the human. The general is surprised that the battle at the palisade is still raging on. He notes with grudging respect that his opponent has impressive vitality. Renya says, "Just what I wanted," and raises his sword for the final blow. Meanwhile, the battle at the palisade is a desperate, chaotic struggle for survival. Kruar stands tall, shouting orders to her beleaguered elven troops. A young elf rallies his comrades, screaming that their families will die if they fail. A female elf echoes his cry, ordering her squad to endure even unto death. A hulking monster closes in on another young elf from behind. She grits her teeth, bracing for the inevitable, powerful blow. She cries out in pain as the monster's club smashes into her. The impact sends her reeling, forcing a choked gasp of blood from her lips. The monster grabs her by the arm, lifting her into the air like a doll. It leers down at her, drooling as it prepares to finish her. Defeated, she whispers the names of her father and Renya-san in despair. The monster's slitted eye focuses intently on its helpless prey. Its pupil constricts slightly, savoring the moment of victory. Suddenly, it looks down at its hand, confused as its grip loosens. The elf, now free, unleashes her own powerful wind blade, severing the monster's arm. With the battle finally over, Kruar slumps to the forest floor, completely spent. She gasps for breath, her face streaked with the grime of a desperate fight. A soldier's triumphant cry rings out, the monstrous horde is finally retreating. The elven defenders erupt in a joyous roar, celebrating their impossible, hard-won victory. Kruar looks on in disbelief, whispering to herself if they have truly survived. Human and elven soldiers embrace, their shared ordeal forging a new camaraderie. Even the shrewd merchant Kiri seems surprised by the sudden turn of events. Her elven comrade, breathless, wonders aloud if she has actually been saved. A calm voice from behind remarks that they made it just in time. Renya appears unscathed, casually noting that a shocked Kruar is still alive. His hand releases a thick rope, which falls limply to the ground. He explains he captured the noisy general, removing his limbs to drag him. Kruar is stunned. Renya claims dragging the body was the most tiring part. He hands the prisoner over, telling the elves to do whatever they wish. She stammers, asking if this means the city and its people are safe. He pauses, his sharp eye taking in the raw emotion on her face. Her expression is a fragile mask of exhaustion, fear, and desperate hope. He softens, calmly confirming that the victory is indeed theirs to claim. Renya gently places a hand on her head, praising her for surviving. His simple kindness shatters her composure, and tears begin to stream down her face. As the sun rises, she weeps in overwhelming relief before her saviors.